Today is Monday, August 5th, 2019. This is the Norton Charter Commission. I call the meeting to order. Present are all members except Kevin Schleicher and David Heaney. Is there anybody who is taping the meeting tonight besides Shane? Okay, we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we are very lucky again to have lots of people who want to come and talk to us, and we very much appreciate your time. We won't keep you too long. The questions are fairly painless. If there's anything you'd like to offer that we didn't ask, please feel free. And I expect, we won't need you for more than a half an hour or so. First up, this is Donna Palmer. She is the public health nurse for the town of Norton. Donna, if you could just provide a brief explanation of what your role here is in town, how long you've been doing it, and just kind of a general idea of your day-to-day.
I have been public health nurse here in Norton for 11 years. My main responsibilities are communicable diseases, investigation of and management of immunizations, and emergency preparedness. Those are the main responsibilities. There are a lot of different roles that I play. I'm on a lot of committees and boards. I'm on the board of directors of the North Cottage, which is across the street from drug and alcohol rehab. I'm also on the opioid task force, which was convened a couple years ago by our police chief. I'm on the school wellness committee. I work closely with the school nurses in an advisory role very often, but we also do some health education. I'm co-director of the Bristol Norfolk Medical Reserve Corps, which is a group of volunteers. It's a federal program, but it's run locally. And I'm a co-director, but we meet as an executive board monthly, and then we have 8 to 9 trainings and just events a year for our volunteers. And these are the volunteers who will help us out when we have emergency situations. They also help me at the flu clinics that I do at the school every year. I usually do 3 big flu clinics, and most of my population now are children. Gradually, the CDC has moved over to us, making sure that we immunize children for flu. And as soon as the pharmacies got flu vaccine, my Medicare business went way down. So it's just as well that I moved over to schools.
Okay. And you presently have a board, and that seats 3 members.
Right.
And what are the board's responsibilities?
For me, it's really an advisory role. Most of the time, I do a monthly report so they know what I'm doing. And every once in a while, I have a question or a change in policy that I'm interested in that I go before the board and discuss with.
Other than that, do you meet on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel there are enough checks and balances or appropriate checks and balances within your department
I do.
and with your board? Okay. Do you feel you have enough autonomy in your position?
Very much so. There are 4 of us in the office, and we all have different roles in the health office, but we collaborate regularly.
Sorry, if you could also, excuse me, I should have asked it earlier, if you could explain your staff and...
Okay, I work with the health agent
Mhm.
and the assistant health agent, and we have an office administrator. So there are 4 of us
Okay.
in a very small office, so I'll get to that later.
Okay. Small office.
But I have my role, we all have our roles, but we overlap and we work together pretty regularly.
Okay. And they're all full-time?
No, I'm only 25 hours.
Okay.
The assistant health agent is 17 hours, 18, and then the health agent and the office administrator are both full-time.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I interrupted you when you were talking about if you felt like you had enough autonomy in your position.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you feel like you get enough guidance?
I do. Yes, for one, the state is very involved.
Okay.
So if I have questions to do with any of my disease investigations or anything like that, the State Department of Public Health and Epidemiology is a wealth of information. They're very supportive, so I use them regularly.
Do you feel that you have access to everything you need, and that can be information, technology, people, that you need to do your job as well as you'd like?
Yes, I do.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely.
And you said you work 25 hours, and you find that sufficient?
Yes, I think it is for a town of this size, I think it is.
Have you noticed any trends in your industry that you see potentially impacting your role and/or department going forward?
I do. In the past 11 years, the emergency preparedness piece has become more and more prevalent. There are a number of committees that I'm on that have to do with emergency preparedness. I basically help write plans for emergencies. Then we have to drill them from time to time. We have inventory. If we had to open a shelter, for instance, or if we had to immunize everyone in town because there was a health scare, I have supplies that I have to have readily available, and that's where the volunteers are so helpful. And so we also do inventory checks on those. We just did one issue. And then I'm on a committee. It's a coalition, really, of health departments, and it's the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Group. And then there's the HAN, there's OPM, there's a lot.
How are you getting this done in 25 hours a week?
The hardest work is
You just, chip away.
Okay, good job. Have you worked with or come in contact with any towns where your department is structured differently?
Yes. I'm a member of the Mass Association of Public Health Nurses, so I see other nurses regularly. But really, there's 351 municipalities in Massachusetts, and they all choose to handle health the best way for them. So my job here is very different from, for instance, the nurse in Sharon has a different job. The nurse in Attleboro's job is different. North Attleboro's a little different. Responsibilities are different who they report to. It really varies. We're a bunch of little fiefdoms.
But you feel that the way that the town is set up and your roles and responsibilities is appropriate for the town of Norton?
I do.
Okay, and there's nothing you'd like to potentially adopt?
We need a bigger office. You've noticed that before.
Are
Yes.
you in this building? Are you in this building?
Okay.
Upstairs.
Upstairs.
I had a quick- oh, sorry. I had a quick question, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So you were talking about the emergency preparedness, and how that's kind of changed over time, and so I was kind of curious, like, what drives that? Like, is that, the federal government, the state government?
Oh.
Both. And I was kind of curious how that fits in with, you mentioned each town does things differently. So how does that kind of work? Like, if you have the state and federal government kind of giving you direction, I assume, on,
You do.
programs you need in place, how does that kind of fit
Well,
in
not
with?
everyone is as good at it as we are.
Oh, there you go.
Seriously, it's funding, so the funding comes, a lot of it comes from the federal government. In our case, goes to the state, and then the state gives it to us to manage. So for our medical reserve corps, we have to submit a budget to the state every year, and they approve it. Every year it's getting a little less, because the idea is that we'll get more autonomous, and we won't require as many funds. Then we have to submit to the state what we're gonna do with the money, and then they dole it out quarterly. And we have to fulfill what they call deliverables. So there are always certain criteria that have to be met in order for us to get the funding,
Sure.
and we do it.
It sounds like your department seems to get a lot of direction, probably outside of the town, perhaps?
Yes.
Yeah, is that fair to say? Yeah.
For me, very much from the State Department of Public Health.
Right, right. This is probably different than a lot of other departments, I imagine, in town. Perhaps,
guess I
yeah,
don't really
yeah,
know.
yeah. No, I was just trying to, it's just a little slightly, seems a little different perhaps than what we've heard from the other people who come in and talk to us.
Right.
Well, keep it up, though, you seem like you're doing a great job.
I think so. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
It's very versatile, which is what I really love about it.
Right,
For instance, I always have a TB patient. Most people don't even realize TB's still around, but I always have that going. And those are the people I manage to make sure they take their meds and they're going to their visits and all. So I have the nursing part of things, so I can still have that aspect, but then the emergency preparedness is different. It's not hands-on as much, so it's really interesting.
Now, how do you get those patients? Do those patients have to be referred to you? Do you have to know about those cases
Yes.
and then you go to
Well, the
them?
way it works in Massachusetts, if you reside in Norton and you're in the Berkshires for a vacation, and you get sick and you go to an emergency room there, depending on what your blood work comes back at, they're not gonna send me your hemoglobin, but if you have a certain infectious disease, that gets reported to the state, and then the state contacts me because you reside in Norton. So then I call your doctor. I don't always get a full complement of information, so it's really investigative work, and I also like that.
Yeah.
So I can call the doctor, sometimes I have to call the hospital where the lab test was done, get the infection control nurse. It differs how, and then eventually I talk to the patient. So, right now we have some foodborne illnesses going on. There's no common denominator as of yet, and usually there isn't. But I get to call those people and ask them what they ate, and where they bought their food, and where they went to restaurants, and some people really know what they're doing. Others are clueless, but, you know.
How fast does
interesting.
it get from the hospital to the state to you? Like, what's the time period to do that happens?
Pretty quickly, and it depends on what the illness is. If it's something that's very contagious, well, not contagious, but very, well, say for instance, it's certain bugs that someone can get at a restaurant, or less, for instance, at the supermarket, E. coli.
Yeah.
I usually get the report within a couple, 3 days. So then I contact the people. And sometimes it takes a while to get the people. Other times I can get it done in 24 hours. So it depends. We had a fascinating one a couple of years ago. It was at a daycare.
Oh,
Yeah. So, and that's solved.
and it was more than a hand, foot, mouth, I take it.
Yes. Yes, and there were a number of children, so
Yeah.
we got taken care of quickly. So. I don't like it when people get sick, but it is a little bit fun.
Carrie, did you have a question?
Yeah, just getting back to the resources that you have, I was wondering if, you said you need a bigger office, and I can completely understand that. Is there anything technology-wise or staffing-wise that you think could help you?
I think there's a big privacy issue, because a lot of the phone calls I make should be private, and I don't have that. So, we manage, but it would be much better if I
Yeah.
had that.
So you're not in an office where you can close the door?
No. There's 4 of us in a pretty small office. How many square feet?
It's 16 by 20.
And there's 4 of us.
Right at 20.
I have no storage, and I don't have a sink. So when someone comes in for a vaccination, I have to run downstairs and living room and wash my hands and then go back upstairs. So it's just, it's not convenient. It's not horrible, but
And do you have to worry about, I would imagine, with the lack of privacy, that lack of privacy for patients who might come in too? Right.
HIPAA laws, is that what you said? Yeah, definitely.
Right about those. It's a concern.
Yeah.
You also don't have a lot of storage in your
I don't have
area.
any.
We got stuff outside here, and it's all over the place.
Yeah. So we have all our inventory for, the sheltering is all outside in a big storage container. And then my extra syringes and things like that are all down cellar, which is not a small room, perhaps, but
So
I
you-
get exercise.
I was just going to say, you get your exercise on a daily basis. In terms of, sorry, if you could clarify, do you report to Chris or do you report directly to Mike Units?
Mike is my boss.
Okay,
But I work very closely with Chris. and we work
Understood.
together every day.
Yep.
So,
okay. And Donna, do you live in town?
I don't.
Okay. So some of these questions, you can kind of, may or may not be entirely applicable, but I'm going to ask a little bit more now about kind of town government and what your feelings are on it. And one of the questions is, you know, do you have any opinion on Norton's town government presently?
I don't.
Okay. Where do you live?
Attleboro.
Okay.
I read the Sun Chronicle, so I know about.
You're aware of what's going on?
that way, but
Okay. Is there anything you don't like about Norton's town government?
No,
Any changes at all that you might like to see?
I would love to see a human resource department. We don't have that. And for instance, we don't have an employee handbook. I've never worked in a place that didn't have something like that, so I think it would be nice to have that.
Okay, I know you've made a couple of references to your office. Were there any other things that you specifically wanted to bring to our attention that we should be made aware of?
No.
No? Okay. I thank you very much for your time. It's very appreciated.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
We appreciate your service.
Listen to it.
Thank you very much.
Laura, you want to get the mic over there?
Oh, yeah. That would be helpful. Thank you, Chris. Okay, next up is Christian Zahner. Is it Zahner or Zahner?
Zahner,
Zahner, excuse me.
it's okay.
And he is the health agent for the town of Norton. These questions are going to sound really familiar, having just sat here for the past 20 minutes.
That's all right.
If you can give me a brief explanation of your role, but what you folks do on a daily basis, a little bit about your staff, and I'm assuming you report directly to Mike Units.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So I'm the department head of the Board of Health. I currently work with Donna, the public health nurse, as well as my assistant health agent, Phyllis Drayton, and Peggy Tavares is my administrative secretary. As Donna mentioned earlier, Peggy and I are the only two full-time employees. Phyllis, because she's only 18 hours, I have her focus right with the food establishments only. Keep her focused on one topic. It's a large topic and takes a lot of heat off of my day. Some of the things that I deal with as the health agent, involved with the code enforcement and inspections for Title V septic issues, private wells, housing issues, public and semi-public swimming pools, nuisance complaints, insect control. I'm sure everybody got their phone call today from me for the mosquito warnings. Solid waste or illegal dumping issues, tobacco control, tanning facilities, body art establishments. We don't really have a body art establishment, but it's in my description. In office, dealing with obviously office management with the 3 employees in the office. I can't echo it loud enough about the size of the office. I know it's probably getting old to listen to that, And the other thing is, well, I'm kind of jumping the ship. I'll wait till I get to that part later. I was jumping ahead on you. Obviously, we have the job of maintaining good public records. I have reporting to, the state on certain items, but not much of it. I do more so reach out for them on an advisory level. Let me see what else I could. And some of the side stuff that I do is I'm also the Town Hall and Fire Department Facility Maintenance Coordinator, and I'm also the Town Vehicle Coordinator. I'm also a
How did
member
you
of
wind up with those two?
Town Hall Facility Maintenance. I took that on when the previous fire deputy chief retired.
Okay.
And so it's just something I took on. And then the town vehicle, I was very much, I was the one that brought the electric vehicle program into town. So I ended up, once I acquired the vehicles, it became my duties to not only maintain them, but also to keep a schedule on, the use, and people sign the car out through my department and that type of thing. So. Also a member of the Norton Opioid Prevention and Education Committee, the Bristol County Public Health Emergency Preparedness Coalition. I'm the chairman of the executive board, and then the Bristol Norfolk MRC volunteer. So that's basically my job.
That's a lot.
Yes,
You're
And-
full-time?
Sorry, go ahead.
Full-time?
I'm full-time, yes.
Do you have a different relationship with the Board of Health than, let's say, Donna does?
I have a little bit more of a direct relation with the board. I essentially what my position is I am the Board of Health when they're not here.
Right.
So I have to maintain communications with them on any large issues that come up. They're a very good group of people. We've got 3 members, and they're all very knowledgeable, and we work very well together. I'll be honest with you, the town of Norton doesn't have a ton of issues. It's a great thing. Believe it or not, there isn't a ton of public health issues right now, and thankfully. But some of the smaller things, if I've got an enforcement issue where, we might have to bring them in they want to come in and have an appeal session with the board, that's what they would be there for. They're there to advise me on certain situations. If I run across a situation that's kind of tough to put to the rule of law and understand how I'm supposed to do so, they help me through that as well, so they're there for an advisory role. Just a number of things that we'll discuss, but the general board functions, like you'd see in any other board, are there as well. So.
You meet periodically?
What's that?
You meet periodically?
We met tonight. We meet once a month, every first Monday of every month.
Chris, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Is that I should know this, but is that an appointed board or a?
They're appointed, yes, by the town manager.
By town manager, okay. And they all kind of have a background in,
Actually, I think they might be by the selectmen. Might be by the selectmen.
probably selectmen, I guess.
Yeah.
And they all have a background in health.
So one of them has a background, one has to have a background in either food or medical. We have one that's background of food and food safety. We have one that has a background of wastewater. And then we have the third one has to be somebody that just has the town's interest in mind. So we have a third guy that does that as well, but he's also a contractor, so it comes into play. It helps out a lot with certain things.
Sure.
But, so yes, they do have to meet requirements. It's in the bylaws.
Thank you.
So what you described, is that just the makeup of today's board, or is that what we described the board to be made up of? In other words, if we,
So that's the makeup of today's, but each position has, 3 or 4 different qualifications that could qualify you for that one spot, and this spot, and then this spot. The third one, the one with the best interest of the town in mind,
yeah,
that's the same. The other ones, you know, like the wastewater gentleman we have, professional we have now, he fits under the wastewater and engineering. And then we have the food or medical field. So that could be a nurse, or it could be a doctor, or it could be somebody, a food safety manager, or that type of thing. So, environmental specialist. So,
Right.
it's tough to get highly qualified volunteers for my board. It's very tough to do.
Yeah, I can see that as a challenge.
Yeah. We lost, when I started, we had an engineer that was, he was a civil engineer for 40-plus years, worked with the DEP, he was very knowledgeable. And it was a big loss for our board, our department. But the new gentleman we have has been a great help, he's fit right in, so.
Yeah, great.
Good.
You mean once a month, you said?
We meet once a month, yep.
Yeah. Is that enough?
Unless it's necessary to meet again, yep, but the regularly scheduled is once a month.
Yeah, and that's generally enough time. That's-
Yeah.
Do you feel there are enough appropriate checks and balances within your department with your board?
I think so. Within the department, not too much goes on in the department without me knowing about it. I started out the department, I started 5.5 years ago. And when I started, to be honest with you, Donna and Phyllis were both, Phyllis, my assistant, they were both considering retiring early because they weren't sure of who the new guy was going to be. And what I told them was, listen, don't be afraid of me. I'm a team player. You know your job. You've been here longer than I have. You know your job. Do your job. I'll do mine. And if it hits the fan, I'll be the one that has to answer to it. But we'll work together and we'll come to a goal that we're all happy with. And to be honest with you, we get told a lot that our office is the model office in the town hall. So
And we agree.
we agree. So we take a lot of pride in working together, and we, you know, constantly running things back and forth on each other. And then I don't do anything of major. I don't have any major activities that I conduct in town without sitting down with Mike Units. Mike's very supportive, and Mike's got an engineering background as well, so it's very helpful that way. And then as far as the board, I get more checks and balances through my board. You know, they're checking on me as well, so, yeah, I think, all around, I think it's pretty good.
Are you comfortable with the level of autonomy that you have in your position?
Yeah, yes, I am.
And how about the level of guidance?
I think so. Like I said, if I have to reach out for the state or even federal government, they're both very, very good about giving you guidance. And then as far as, like, the board can only do so much. You know what I mean? They have their expertises, but there's certain things, like I've read off the list of stuff here, they don't know all of those things, and there aren't too many volunteers you're going to have that do know all of these issues that I deal with throughout the course of my day. So I have different, places like the state, the DPH and that I can reach out to. I've got plenty of guidance. Mike Units, again, engineering-wise, managerial-wise, everything, so it's been good.
Okay. Along that same vein, thinking about information technology people, do you have everything you need to do your job as properly as you'd like?
So, technology-wise, we just had a nice upgrade to our technology as far as computers, and also we just upgraded to an e-permitting system. So that's now in the it was brought into town by the building commissioner. He brought up because he used to work in a different town that had that program, and so he introduced it to the town of Norton. And so now the building commissioner and myself and the fire department do our permits through e-permitting, and we're able to work together online to see, permits and approve their permits back, inter-office, interdepartmental type stuff, and then,
Are you seeing the efficiencies that you folks had hoped for in terms of?
it's still very new to
Yep.
us, and the other part that has made it kind of tough as we started midway through the year.
Okay.
So, for an example, we just got Samsung tablets to do the inspections on.
Okay.
And the hard part about that right now is all the licenses that were granted and the like the food establishment permits and all that stuff that was done at January 1st, you know, they were completed by then. And we started this program more towards the spring. So all the information of those licenses and permits are not in the system. You know what I mean? And it's so trying to, and then the other thing is we still have to reach for those file drawers constantly, which I would love to see someday to have all those files scanned into the system so we can just access it on our computer and not have to dig like that. It would make things way more efficient as far as our job, as well as, you know, public record requests and anything else, so. But yes, technology's doing very well. It's just the building itself that is brutal.
How about from the perspective of the residents? Do you find that they are finding the e-permitting system easier to navigate?
I think that we've had a lot of compliments, but we've also had a lot of criticism to it. The criticism generally comes from, I don't want to be disrespectful, but the older crowd that are not really tech savvy.
Yep.
So it's intimidating for them.
Yes.
All right. But the younger crowd that are a little bit more tech savvy, they love it. They think it's, you know, it's a great addition. And they were able to apply for their permit from home. They could pay online. We can basically converse, do everything on that system. So it's really good. I think as we get the bugs worked out of it, it's going to be excellent. So.
Have you noticed any trends in your industry that you see potentially impacting your role or your department?
I think I have to agree with Donna. The public health emergency preparedness is a hard. You know, it kind of irks me, to be honest. I mean, I like being prepared for an emergency, but the way the state and federal government puts the mandates on us that we have to do this, and there's, you know, it's not like they throw the town some money to help give us a raise to cover this stuff. It's just added to our plate. And so that, I think, is the toughest change in the industry.
Okay.
As far as, like Donna said, a lot of the other boards of health, they all work differently.
Okay.
And I think a lot of it is town charter or bylaws, but it's also who do you have for members of your board. You know, some boards out there are extremely involved, and some are just, I show up once a month. You know what I mean? So you see a lot of different ways that things get done.
Okay.
Are there any of those ways that you think, wow, to do things that way? Or it might be easier if I did that?
I'll give you an example. I had watched Mansfield's board a lot, and well, I don't know. I don't think so. I think that you know, they're doing what they need to do for what their town has going on, and I don't think that you know Mansfield's got a 5-member board, but they've got a lot going on over there. She's the girl that's the agent over there. She's got like 400 and something food establishments that she was doing on her own, plus the Title V and all this other stuff that I listed, to the point where she just had to bring in an assistant. But so that, you know, I think the situation, the way the way we are, works for Norton.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we're inefficient in any way, if that's what you mean by it.
No, just, I mean, think about town charter, right? So our charter is structured a certain way. If it was structured differently, what would be like an ideal world?
Quite honestly, I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
Okay. Fair enough.
And where did you work previously to this?
I was actually in the septic industry for 21 years.
Okay. Have you, in dealing last 5 years or so, worked with or come across any towns? Well, we kind of covered that, where everybody seems to be structured a little bit differently and bespoke for the town.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do you live in town?
I don't. I live in Taunton.
Taunton. All right, so again, somewhat related, but we'd appreciate your opinion nonetheless. Are there things that you like about Norton's town government?
Things I like about it? Well, I don't have a whole lot of interaction with, I have to see the selectmen maybe once or twice a year. Budget time or whatever. Well, that's the other thing, I just became the union steward, so I'm gonna have to go through that too. I think that the way things are in town hall, I can speak for.
Yep, that'd be
I
great.
think that all these departments, when I first started, it was very separate. Everybody was separate, they did their job, and the communication was not even close to being there. Now, it seems like we're all trying to work together. As Mike has brought people in, he's brought people in that have that strength of communicating with each other, working as a team, so, the building commissioner, the new building commissioner, myself, the new planner, or and then we've got some of the veteran employees, like the conservation agent, treasurer, and the accountant department, but we all work close together now. We all talk a lot, and we have department head meetings once a month to make sure we're all in tune with each other, what's going on. There might be something that comes up that you want to run by somebody else to get an idea of, is this something you want me to talk to you about? Do you want me to notify you if I see this? For an example, if somebody saw a house with a construction going on it and they don't see a permit in the window, should I let the commissioner know? That type of stuff. But I mean, it's simple communication, but it's helped big time in this town hall so that everybody works together in the efficiency. And I think it gives Mike a lot of credit. I give Mike a lot of credit for the way he's brought the atmosphere up since I've been here anyway.
Okay.
That's about it. I mean, again, I don't really deal directly with too much of the town government, except I have to go to town meeting. And I haven't had to do a whole lot of speaking at town meeting, thank God.
Understood. Do you attribute the space that you're in for the kind of more of the camaraderie between departments?
I think it's the employees putting the effort forth to making that happen. I think, like I said, when I first started, it wasn't there, and the previous building inspector and I kind of pushed it along at that point with Mike, and we discussed it, and that's when we started the department head meetings, and it was something that us as department heads put together and pushed.
Are there any changes that you'd like to see?
One of the big things that I wish was in place, to be honest with you, I'm just going to be completely honest.
We'd appreciate that.
I really wish that there was a rule in place that committees, boards, department heads, public officials, however you want to put it, you're not allowed to talk about town stuff on social media, period. End of discussion, because there's just so many rumors going on out there that it's just making life just difficult, I'll give you a prime example, the electric cars. There was a post on Facebook. Somebody took a picture of those cars and said, "Can you believe that there's over $100,000 worth of cars that we just paid for to just sit around here and do nothing?" Well, they didn't realize that the town didn't pay $15,000 for those 4 cars to sit here for 3 years. Those 4 cars and the Chargers got here for $14,000 and change because of grants that I was able to get and everything else. So it was kind of my fault, because I probably should have put out a public, notice about it and made everybody aware that I did this, but I didn't want to. I wasn't trying to get the pat on the back. I just wanted to do the right thing. But because I didn't, that's what we get. We get those kinds of rumors out there, and I just wish that type of thing wasn't, happening, and that's what's causing a lot of havoc right now.
Was that from
But it wasn't, was it an employee that posted it?
I can't, yeah, I don't want to say who did it.
No, I just wanted to verify it was an employee as opposed to just a member
Yeah.
of the public. Okay.
So, that type of thing, you know, and then I do notice that, you know, some of the committee members of, you know, new and old, you know, they're boisterous on there. It's just not good.
Anything else that we didn't ask about that you'd like to talk about?
So I think, you know, yeah, I agree with Dawn around 100% on the HR director. You know, Mike's been the guy I go to, but there's some stuff that, you know, if we had an HR person, I could leave him alone.
Yep.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, the poor guy, he tries to be there for everybody, but he's just, you know, there's times he's just got to shut his door, you know? And we don't have anybody really to go to. And the fact that the payroll is in the treasurer's office, you know, it just makes us all feel like our payroll is a rumor in the office, you know, and our HR issues, you know, so it doesn't feel confidential. And then IT director, somebody that's available more readily than what we have. Because the situation we're in right now, although they're very good people, from, trying to think of the name, I can't remember the name of the company, MX Consultants, I think it is.
Yep.
They're very good people, but it's tough to get a hold of them, you know? And their priority always seems to be the police department, which is, I understand, the police are the priority, but I'll end up waiting a week and a half to finally get them in because they're spread so thin or whatever it might be. I don't know what it is, but if we had somebody on a daily basis, even if it was part-time but every day, it would be better, you know?
Absolutely.
Can I go back to the social media issue for a minute? Because I agree with you. I think that social media can, you know, start all these rumors and people don't know facts. It's also, it can be such a powerful tool too. So I'm wondering if, you know, you don't like to see it out there and you don't like to see employees just willy-nilly out there making posts. But what about controlling it? You know, what about, you know, a site or something that you're able to put out the information that you want out there? I feel like regardless, you're going to get people who are going to complain
Yeah,
about
yeah.
electric cars, even
So-
if that post was up, or
Yep.
you're going to get that. But how do you feel about kind of like moving to that way where you put that information, or whomever department we're talking about puts that information out there? These are the facts. This is it.
Yeah, so I've thought about that. And you're absolutely right, you're gonna get complaints, because I got about 10 complaints about that post that I put out today on the Norton Alerts. People complained. They complained that I let them know that there's Triple E in the area.
So, yeah.
That was all they were complaining about?
No, those are the people you're not gonna make happy.
You're not gonna
you
make
know?
it work.
That's right, you need to use social media in a healthy way.
What was
So-
the,
So I put out the post today on Norton Alerts.
yes, but what were the specific complaints?
It was, the complaint was that I didn't sign up for that. So what happened was when we brought in Norton Alerts, we brought in Norton Alerts, all landlines were automatically added to the system
Okay.
through, you know, I don't know if it was given up by Verizon or however that happened, but all landlines were put into the system.
Okay.
And that was for town emergencies, you know?
Yep.
And when you sign up, you have the right to filter out what you do and do not want to hear.
Right.
Apparently, they didn't realize that.
Can I ask, did you find the complaints were predominantly from people who received phone calls that didn't want them?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just asking because we're about to do one. We have a survey that we're going to make available, and we're going to do it, and we're discussing limiting it to email only.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel that might
I'd
be
love
a
to be able
safer
to do
route.
text, but it's so limited on
Yes,
the
yeah.
characters, so, today I did email and landline.
Mm-hmm.
And it went out to, I think, 5,900 people.
Yep.
It's
know-
funny though, there's a lot of people in a lot of houses don't even answer their landlines, or they don't even have them. They're
I had a
cell
woman
phones,
call-
So you got the 10 people.
This is something you can't make up. The woman called today and said, "I saw it come up on my screen. I know you probably left me a message, but what does it say?" I can't make it up.
Can I ask along those lines, how did you get in charge of that, the Norton Alert system? Is that normally part of your role?
No, so
or-
I introduced Norton Alerts to the town of Norton. I ran into the gentleman, I don't even remember where I found him. But when I got done talking to him about it, I was excited about it because we had no way of notifying for a public health emergency or anything like that. There's a reverse 911 system that we were a part of through fire department and police department that you had to call, I think it was Plymouth, dispatch or something like that. It was weird. You had to call someplace in Plymouth, and they would approve whether or not they felt that your alert was worthy enough for them to put out. And it kind of just, is like useless, because you didn't want to challenge them with, you know what I mean? So I wanted something that, you could put out public health emergencies, and then being able to break it up into just emails, or just text messages, or just social media. I could put out, lighter stuff, like, hey, we're having hazardous waste day, or, whatever it might be, So, and I knew it would be good for all the departments, but that's how I originally got involved, and then when I brought it into town, it was handed over to we had a director of communications at the time, Charlene Fisk. And Charlene became ill before she could get it fully set up. And we went like a good amount of time with it. We're paying for this and we're not getting to use it, and we weren't sure if she was coming back or not. Well, finally, Mike said to me, hey, can you help? Let's just try and get this thing up. So Mike and I worked together and we got it up and running. And it's still not at 100% because of the fact that I don't have time to train the whole town on how to use this thing. And I don't use it enough that I feel confident enough to be the trainer, honestly. But I have it up enough where I was able to, help you guys use it a little bit, and, it's just, that's how I got it anyway. I'm just trying to be a town helper,
We appreciate it. Hopefully that we found out, I did a test today just to myself and found out if you send an HTML, you can actually send a usable link via email. So we're hoping that's going to improve the response
Yeah,
for the survey that we're putting up. So,
awesome,
yeah,
awesome.
so look for that coming soon. Anything else? Any changes? Any general complaints?
I'm going to, one final time, just go back to the town hall. I deal with a lot of enforcement on different things, one being housing. Housing can be very embarrassing for people. If it's like a hoarding type situation, there's a mental health disability there. When they come to your window and they're crying, and I've got no place to go with them, and I'm sitting out in the hallway talking to them in front of everybody that walks by, it's just not right, all right? And we really don't, this is the only spot that I currently have that I can go to, and it's not very private.
Right.
So, we are in dire need of private, like, conference rooms to go to. The other thing is, the office is so small that I can't escape you know what I mean? Neither can anybody else, but we can't escape. It's tough to focus on your job because you hear everything else that's going on because it's right behind you. As Donna said, Donna does the investigations on the communicable diseases, and she's asking them some pretty personal questions, and I'm listening to every one of them. And then there's the times when she's doing flu shots, and I come out from behind my desk and I look over and there's somebody from town getting their flu shot with their shirt hiked up, and it's like, this shouldn't be, so this is, it's kind of embarrassing, this building, so I just wanted to make that final point.
Yep, I appreciate it. Again, there's not a lot we're personally going to be able to do about that, but we do.
No, I know,
We
but I
appreciate
figured
your-
I'd
Yeah.
use the platform and put it out there.
No, absolutely.
Absolutely should.
One last question. You mentioned earlier that you wish that the files were all scanned in PDF. What is the impediment to doing that? Is it access to the scanner? Is it the time? Is it
Well,
space on the server?
first of all, we have to purchase the part of the program that allows us to archive all those files, because you have to own so much cloud space.
Yep.
to do it, okay? Second of all, the amount of files that you would have to put through that machine, we'd probably be constantly buying machines. We'd be breaking them from all the use. I was hoping when we did this that there would be a company that could take our files and scan them and organize them and make them, just get it done.
Mhm.
I'm not too sure that that's gonna happen. The cost of that is just huge.
Cost prohibitive.
Yeah, so, I know I heard multiple thousands of dollars in numbers that just seemed like, now I started to go back on my thoughts on it and say, well, all right, how am I gonna do this on my own, So, haven't figured that out yet, but, there is the cost issue and in getting the space online first. Once that happens, then we'll have to figure out how to get the rest of it done. But I heard an estimate of one of the departments for like $30,000 just to scan their files.
That's one department.
One department, yeah.
I was just
So it
curious.
adds up.
What's your record retention requirement?
It depends on what it is. Most of them are 7 years, but it depends on what it is. Title V or septic is forever until the system's gone. For the system records, like plans and stuff
Yep.
like that. And I'm sure the building department's probably the same way. But then there's stuff like Title V inspections that, they're only good for 2 years or 3 years, so they
Yep.
can be eliminated afterwards.
Okay.
Depends on what you got, so.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's all a work in progress, I guess.
Any other questions for Chris? We thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
All right,
Thank you.
take care.
Hey, Chris and Donna, over here.
Dr. Baeta,
Good evening.
how are you?
Great.
Thank you for your patience.
Pleasure. Not a problem.
Again, questions are going to start sounding really familiar, but I'm actually hoping we have a couple of teachers on staff that are going to help me with
Sure.
a few more department-specific related. But if you don't mind, if you could just start a little bit, give me a brief explanation of your role and your staff and
Sure.
how long you've been.
So this is, July 1st was the beginning of my 7th year in Norton. As the superintendent of schools, I was also in another district prior to that. My direct responsibilities is pretty much everything and anything to do with the school department, either through direct responsibility to some subordinate or directly myself. I answer to a 5-member school committee, which is an elected board. And that board oversees everything to do with policy and finance, superintendent's evaluation, superintendent's hiring and termination, and then on the recommendation of the superintendent, the assistant superintendent of schools, the business manager, the PPS director, the school nurses, and the school doctor. But those are on recommendations. They can't do it on their own as a board. We have, if you count some of our day-to-day substitutes that come in, we have in excess of 400 employees, 2,400 students. We're the biggest budget for a reason. Probably have some of the biggest mandates within our budget process, and growing with less and less funds available, or revenue, I should say. So that's kind of the big picture of how the department works. If you want me to dive into the connection to the town, we kind of in some ways stand alone, except for finance and policy. So that's, I think the whole system is rigged to have a kind of a us versus them mentality that I've seen in almost every community that I've lived in or I've been involved in. We have full flexibility to the budget. So once the budget is voted at town meeting, school committee can do whatever they want with that budget. So they could say we're going to spend $100,000 on X, and the day after town meeting, decide it's going to go to Y. They have that full autonomy. Town meeting can't even have a debate and discussion on a specific line item of that of working operating budget. It's considered illegal because they have that 5-member board has that autonomy from the rest of the town. Versus, for example, the town side has to go to the Board of Selectmen and go through a whole process just to move a dollar from something. So, in terms of my committee, the way that it works is they authorize me to make those changes, and then we, depending on when they happen, then we come back and we revote our budget. I have autonomy myself to do what I need to do with the budget, as long as I don't move the bottom line. I can't overspend without having discussions with them. We had that happen a couple of years ago with special education mandates, where we, at one point, were almost $800,000 in the negative. So informing my units that I may have to utilize the FinCom reserve or go back to town meeting for more funds, that's a separate process that belongs to the town, but it starts with my board.
Question.
Absolutely, please.
I don't understand the process that much. So the school board has total autonomy.
Yeah.
Is that mandated by the state?
Yes,
But-
it's under they're regulated by Chapter 70.
So that's the same in every school district?
Correct, yes. So you can't, your local town meeting can't change that, if you will. Your town charter can't change that. The only way that that's changed is if you completely change your form of government. So if you went from not a town meeting, not an open town meeting or even representative, but if you went to a mayor type of government, then you have some changes that take place when it comes to that, because depending on what type of government you go into, if you have a strong mayor government, the mayor becomes the chair of the school committee automatically. It doesn't go to another member versus a weaker form of government, just to use the extremes. A lot of your urban districts are run by more of the mayor type of government with a city council, but the school committee is still separate from the city council, still creates its own budget, but now it's got that one body that's crisscrossing between the two. My sister-in-law used to be the mayor of Newburyport, and that was one of the big eye-openers for her when she became the mayor, was that, she now had two boards that she was dealing with. And she was elected, but still, the fancy of having to be responsible to two different groups of people, if you will. Good and bad with that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Great.
I know there is.
And they're in conflict, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's always conflict. I mean, it's just the school department usually is the biggest budget in town.
Yeah.
It usually expends the most money. It usually has the most mandates that are difficult to meet. The state formula is, there's probably no community in the South Shore that's getting more negative from the state formula than the town of Norton. I mean, you're making up for a community that for decades was considered to be getting too much state aid. And so what the state did for all of those communities, there's about 40 of us, is they said, well, guess what? We gave you too much for so many years, now we're going to actually bring that down. So the goal is for them to get to a level where they're not, your inability to pay community. Norton is on the top of the list. You are compared to Norwell when it comes to the state formula. So you consider the ability to pay, one of the things in the formula is your tax rates. They look at your tax rate, your per capita income, and they say you should be paying more. I'm not saying that you should, because I don't want to be killed out there. I already know people think that because of prior overrides, but that's the rationale. That's the give or take.
So I had a question about the budget. I get the point of the autonomy that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But in terms of focusing on the relationship between town government and school district leadership in developing the actual budget, what degree does school leadership collaborate with the town in any type, or do they at all?
Yeah, so we file our budget 8 weeks through Mike Unit's office to the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, the town accountant, the town treasurer, and the town manager. They all get a copy of our budget. It's about 80 pages.
Is there any collaboration, like before?
The
that
collaboration
budget?
usually is between Mike giving me some general sense, Mike Units giving me some general sense of what the revenue looks like. So what are our shared costs? Health benefits are going to go up $500,000. Well, if you only have $600,000 in the reserve account, or in your year-to-year account that came from surplus, I guess now we're getting split $100,000. And that's pretty much the way it works. So we're very stuck to some of those fixed costs. Borrowing is going to be on there. You really don't have a whole lot of discussion about, what your contractual mandates are. The town side has some, I think, municipal contract mandates under safety, but I don't have that flexibility on the school side. Some communities do. They have, for example, there are communities that cap class sizes at the early grades, predominantly kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and you have to fulfill those class sizes by local contract. So the process from FinCom is then I go in front of FinCom and provide backup information as needed, more information, questions, why do we need this person, how come we're doing that? And usually I'm the longest person presenting at FinCom. And usually this past year, we were brought back twice for Q&A and more answers, and that had a lot to do with other things as well, the rumors that the school department was going after town departments and was going to cut them, and which were not true. So, you know, depending on your philosophy of you know, going forward in terms of the budget process, I have some thoughts about efficiencies that I think we should look at, and I can talk to that when the question comes up. But that's the process.
Okay.
And then we're given a number.
Yeah.
The school committee can accept that number and say publicly, yes, we agree, or they can say, well, we're going to town meeting, we don't think this is the right approach.
So there really isn't much collaboration. It's more of, this is our budget, and
Right.
you're looking at it, and what you can do, what you can't do, but it's not a collaboration process bringing it to the table.
No, and we have a deep-rooted philosophy in the town, and I'm going to be careful about what I say, just because I don't live in the town and I'm not a community member, but although I do send my child to the school system, we have this thing called the 70-30 split. We get 70% of the money, and the town gets 30% of the money, and I hope that people that believe in that, I'm going to be pretty sarcastic, I hope they're not Norton High School graduates, because the numbers don't add up. They just don't. There is no 70-30 split. But yet, there's a very deep-rooted philosophy from certain members of the community that are active in certain boards that it is. The fact of the matter is, we have mandates we have to meet, period. If that's a $500,000 increase, there's nothing I can do with that. I mean, in this town, what we've been doing is we've been taking from one part of education to provide for the other part of education. We eliminated an entire food services department and went privatization so that we didn't have to pay long-term costs on the town side, never mind the school side. So I think that we have to take a look at, you know, what are we going to be when we grow up? I just heard that comment earlier today from someone else. I always say, who do you want to be, Norton? Because you are a little great piece of Americana, and if you want to keep it, you're going to have to change the way you do some things. You know, and I don't think it needs to be at a cost necessarily to another department or to another priority, which I guess big picture, my biggest criticism or biggest piece that I would like to see is, where in the charter does it require a strategic plan of the town? A 5-year strategic plan. We have a 3-year strategic plan. We know for the next 3 years, outside of mandates, our Vision 2022, which we just published, and I was going to bring a copy with me, and I forgot. I can electronically send it to you if you'd like. Some of you might
That'd
have
be
it
great.
for me as parents as well. But we haven't decided that the school department can go after this 3 years from now because we're going to do A, B, and C first. And accept a mandate, I think that's what you have to do to run a town. You have to say to yourself, how are we going to increase? I mean, if I hear the phrase, quote, 1997, we have the same number of police officers as we did in 1997. Well, if that's true, where in the budget have we prioritized that, I'm sorry, the schools are not going to be able to get X, Y, and Z or another department because that's the priority. We might not like it, but the fact is we've agreed to that document as a community. So the schools would have to be part of that strategic plan financially and policy-wise and all of that. That's in my opinion, that's the only way long-term to get out of some of the issues that we face in terms of efficiencies.
And would the school budget be part of that strategic plan?
Yes, it'd have to
If it's
be.
So the whole town?
Right, it'd have to be. I mean, we can outside of mandates, we're pretty fixed at our increases from year to year. Right, when I need to hire 2 more paraprofessionals for 2 students in 1-to-1, and I get that on May 15th, and town meeting was May 14th, I'm already $50,000 in the hole in my budget because I just got a mandate. There's a community, Arlington, which is not a lot like us and is a lot bigger, but their finance group basically has said, we understand that special education is probably going to go up around 7%. So we're going to make sure we have those funds, and then we're going to make sure that the general education, if you will, the remaining budget has about 3%. And that's how they calculate, and they strategically have said, no, you can't hire more people in this department right now because that's going to step outside the scope of your 3% or your 2.5% or whatever the number would be, versus we get it. If you can only spend 5% this year in the mandates, then guess what? We get some leeway for 2% that can go into other departments, regardless if it's schools or or town side. We have a revenue problem. It's that simple. You know, my couple of colleagues on the finance committee that I always have a few laughs with is there's only certain amount of money. Our biggest issue now is school choice. We've had a very successful school choice program. By the way, every community around us is now going into school choice. We beat it by 6 years, which is good for us. We've got about 125 kids coming for next year. It's going to give us yet another $180,000 to $220,000. If we didn't have that money, we wouldn't have any of the stuff that we have. We're trying to generate international students with a potential for 9 students coming from China in fiscal 21, bringing in, you know, almost $15,000 per student. And if they live in town, they're residents of the town, which means we can also count them as part of Chapter 70. So we're trying to be creative with the revenue, yet now that we're getting that revenue, we have some folks who want to give us less of the, what I would call required taxpayers' revenue. So it becomes this yin and yang back and forth. So it's, and I think the, you know, long story short of it is that there's no finger to point at, in my opinion. I'm not going to sit up here, and I don't typically spend a lot of my time at meetings pointing fingers at the other side, because it's not going to get me anywhere. But we think that very strongly that we need to have some type of a strategic financial and long-term planning. I know that the economic development plan, the master plan, has started to be worked on. I think this week or next week there's a meeting. We have a vision. We kind of know that the idea of teaching the whole child social emotional learning and all that topics that's happening there is going to be college and career readiness. That's going to be our big 3 topics for the next 3 years. And we have some definitions of what we think those are going to cost us in terms of on top of the general cost for anything that's new.
All right.
I know I jumped all over the place, but
No, that was good, because I feel like what I hear you saying is that you want a collaboration, you want to collaborate more, you want to do it in this 5-year plan, and you want to do it more with the town so that it's a more holistic approach than schools versus not schools.
we're the biggest budget. You can't do it without us, because we have the biggest impact from year to year.
Right.
You know, every single year we're the biggest hit.
Right, but we, so the others can't do it with you because you're the biggest budget, but you're saying you still want to collaborate, you want to do the collaboration, correct?
Yeah, we added a school resource officer 4+ years ago. We know that's paid for 75-25 school department to the town. This year, we're lucky enough, it seems that at least a part-time SRO, maybe full-time, is going to be made available as part of the budget, thanks to the chief and Mike's work to bring that forward. So why? Because that's a safety issue. You know, a lot of superintendents might not have the same opinion I do, but I'm not about to try to debate a safety issue for the school department if the police chief and I are working collaboratively to bring someone. Keith is here. I know he's acting in a different role, but we can't do 3/4 of our building projects out in the roads and everything else without his office. And so that accounts for a significant number of projects that we get done where we can utilize our public employee through the highway department to put down street tar or a parking lot instead of going out to bid it for 3 times the price. So we're doing a lot of that type of thing. We just agreed on a long-term electric provider. Mike and I started that a few years ago. So there's some of that stuff that's taking place. I don't think we do a good job of communicating the savings that brings, right? Like, you know, if I was paying 60 and town was paying 30 and that's 90 and now we're getting it for 80, we're not out there really communicating how we save $10,000 by being together. And I think of, again, only because he's at the table, I think of Keith's department as a perfect example of that. Nobody in town really knows. It's kind of like the comment earlier about the cars. You know, we're not doing enough of a good job communicating that out to the residents. And some of which won't even listen. I mean, when my 2 colleagues were up here, one of them was talking about rumors. Please, I mean, the school department deals with social media rumors every day.
Yeah.
I made a comment earlier to myself that communication, I kind of highlighted it. And, you know, when we talk to town employees like yourself, you know, they talk about social media and communication going that way and criticizing the school department and whatnot. You know, then when we meet with you talk to people in town, or we had one of our first meetings, you know, town people were invited in, and what do they complain about? Lack of communication from the town
Right.
to them. So and I don't know if it's all fair, but it's nonetheless, it's a common topic.
Yeah, the hardest the hardest position that I put in was the communications office. Because we could not spend enough time on the social media addressing the issues that just are not factual. And we made a decision 3 years ago strategically that we were no longer going to accept public statements that were outright lies, because they nail us. In this day and age of competition, I mean, I'm 50. You didn't have a lot of competition for the seat I was going to in high school. Today, every parent, including your superintendent, we have choices. Private school, vocational school, Aggie school, those have kind of always been around. But charter school, I mean, at one time, we had 203 students in this district in the charter school. We're at 93. And I think a lot of it has to do with just talking to parents and saying, what can we do to have you be more confident in our public school system? You're already paying the taxes. But I do think that rumors is, I mean, we're in the day and age of it. That today we're talking, we have to begin archiving every single piece of social media in the school department, ASAP. So any tweet that I send out, any Facebook message, any of that done by a public official has to be archived. For a lawsuit, for a firing and termination, it all has to be archived.
So archiving just what you're tweeting or the response, are you archiving? the
Well, in my case, I'd be handling, anything that comes to me becomes public information to begin with, unless it's really about a minor or that type of situation. The moment you email me, it's pretty much public information, except if it's FERPA violation and HIPAA violations and that type of stuff.
Right.
That's why the boards are so difficult sometimes to communicate with the committee, because I have to remind them in a general communication to them, please do not respond to me or do not have a deliberation, because that's a violation of the open meeting law. But, you know, if you get sued and they're asking you for, did you have any communication with Joe Smith? I don't think I have any Joe Smiths who work for me. Then I have to provide that information. I just recently had a lawsuit where, well, it wasn't a lawsuit. It started with the Office of Civil Rights. It was going down that road, but we handled it. But I mean, I had 2 legal boxes worth of social media, email communication between my office personnel who work for me and a third party. So we had to give that all up, but we have to start archiving all of that. Town hall's going to have to do the same thing. So you get that catch-22 where we want to do more social media, we want to communicate more, and then we say, oh, by the way, now we need $30,000 a year to just start archiving this stuff, because we don't have enough boxes to put it in.
Yeah, it's more to save too, yeah.
And I know you have an IT, but do you have a PR person?
Yeah, we have a communications office we started last year, and that person is a sole person that works on behalf of we just met today for an hour on branding, marketing, all that our competitors are doing, making sure that we're sending the same message out. That person is in charge of all of our social media in terms of the day-to-day messaging that we try to do. For example, we talked today about how do we keep our families in the loop next summer or during breaks. Do they want to be in the loop? You know, that type of stuff. And then most of us, a lot of my job is marketing. I mean, really talking to families, responding, trying to provide good answers, fighting a good fight when we have to, unfortunately, but that sometimes is what we have to do. And it's interesting because, you take a little heat for any of those ideas, which is fine, but, one of the things that I always try to do is say, how can we be more efficient so that we can stop having people worry about this and let them actually worry about teaching and learning and the safety of the school district.
You had mentioned efficiencies, and you were going to get into that.
Yeah, so an example would be, let's get together and talk about technology, which Chris mentioned earlier. My director is in instructional technology. She comes from the classroom perspective, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't be looking at a technician that, although maybe that person, and Mike and I have talked about this, it's just been the budget crunch, but someone who could be available as needed to the school department and is also working for the school department, because God knows I could use that body with over 2,700 new laptops, Chromebooks, and all of that stuff that just break. HR is important. You have to find the right person, though, because they're dealing with school contracts, which are very different from municipal contracts, and regulations around that. That can always be tricky. I have an HR payroll person. They're not a trained HR person, but they deal with those issues. They bring them to me, and then I make a decision. I think that's what happens to Mike as well. And then to a certain extent, facilities. I know that Chris mentioned earlier that he does some stuff with facilities, but in terms of, if you're going to be successful in the future with a new town hall, senior center, et cetera, how are those, we had almost $70,000 increase in the first year at the new Norton High School because of cleaning, wax, utilities, you name it, and the most expensive of them was preventative maintenance, which some of you know is you got to clean out the HVAC systems every year, not every 5 years, if you want to keep them long term. So I think in the area of facilities, that's another area that we could have some collaboration. My biggest concern is that it's not just a body, it's multiple bodies. Because if you want somebody to be in the trenches, you can't have them also be answering all the phones all the time and writing the memos like an administrative assistant would do. I think that's one of the areas where, unfortunately, Town Hall has taken quite a beating through the years of cutting back on the number of people supporting. So you end up with your $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 positions having to stand behind a computer hour after hour after hour, where that person could actually be out in the trenches. And so I always say that when you think about these things, I think you have to worry about the structures that go with positions. It's not just get another body, because then you're just going to end up with the same situation I've seen when I started here, which is, so we had a supervisor of facilities. That person had no working knowledge whatsoever of a building. That's not her fault. That's not her fault at all. She did the job that she could, and when she moved, and I was coming in, we created the director of facilities position, because we had a building project going on with no director of facilities and no director of instructional technology. So now you can ask me, how much money have I spent at the new Norton High School in our operating budget since then? Almost $300,000. Why? Because we left things on the table that should have been prioritized. That's nobody's to blame. We just didn't have certain expertise at the table. Perfect example of that would be, how many wireless connectivity spots do you need in a high school? We put one between every 2 rooms. By the time the building's network system was working, kids on average have 3 to 4 gadgets on them. So we had to go back and spend $100,000 and do that. So yes, there's a cost. There's long-term costs. Retirement systems, salaries, health benefits. All of that. But old record. I'm going to always say, what do you want to be, Norton? It's that simple for me. I think you have a great community. People definitely want to move into it, because you can't keep a house on the market right now. That's a great thing to have if you're willing to sell. But I think you have to have bodies in offices. You don't want to have a potential brand new town hall and have offices that are closed every day at 1 o'clock because the person's only working part-time. That scares me. That would be the inefficiency.
I'm going to ask a somewhat random question. Would it help in any way if the town went to an off year-end calendar basis, specifically related to budgeting?
Yeah, it's good. School side is going to be an issue, more so than anyone else. I get the idea behind it, and I'm not necessarily against it, but it does cause some different frictions on our side, because we do have some significant mandates through the federal government, for example, grants and all of that stuff that would become a little different to address. For us, that's around $1 million, but it's more of the most. Sometimes the most efficient things that we do are grounded on timelines, and sometimes they're not. Right? We know that we're being lucky enough and conservative enough. Let's also pat on the back those that are in charge, which is not me. That we've had some nice surpluses in free cash the last few years. So that's been a little bit of luck, new buildings coming into town, new businesses, new receipts, new excise taxes that conservatively weren't thought of at the time, rightfully so. The idea is, Mike says it all the time, roughly 5% of your total budget should be something that you're looking at as some type of free cash. But then what we do with it is we survive with free cash the following year by putting some money aside. And we have a number, I think it's 700,000, I don't even know how that number came about, but if it's 700,000 this year, it can't be 700,000 next year, because you know that you already get at least a 3 to 4 to 5% increase in just salaries alone, never mind mandated costs.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question. I know that you stated, or it's been stated somewhere in the past, about student enrollment being down
Sure.
over the past 10 years. I think on the school website, there's that link to the transparency.
Yep.
And,
Bless you.
I like that that's up there, and I like that Norton has unlocked it. A lot of communities don't have it unlocked, so you
Right.
cannot see what's there, but I like the ability to
Yep.
go in there and see that. So I guess my question was, with student enrollment down, what measures, and I think you've addressed it a little bit, but I'm just going to go out and ask it, and we'll pull back a little bit. What measures and procedures, if any, do you have in place with the town leadership to make sure that with this trend in enrollment numbers going down, we're using all the resources and the buildings and everything in the most cost-effective manner?
Yeah, so this kind of always goes to the question about how do we close a building and give it to this and that as well, because I hear that all the time. So there's a couple tricky things that we did an internal study, right? We reviewed the study. We took plenty of criticism for the study because we didn't show savings in certain areas that people thought were going to be saved, in the same way that we didn't say increased costs in other areas. If you walk our classrooms, you're going to see at the elementary level 20 to 24 to 25 kids in every classroom in the buildings. We rent out a total of 9 spaces district-wide to Reed's Collaborative. We get about $65,000, $70,000 from that, and BICO has one classroom at the middle school for, I think it's $36,000, 30 or 36, it's in that ballpark. So we get about $100,000 coming in. That goes into our facilities account, which is what pays for almost every single emergency that we have with facilities. Besides that, our buildings are full. They have kids in them. You have to remember that we've gone from 60 kids out of district to 40 kids out of district. That's been a big reason why our special ed costs, especially in out-of-district tuition, have come down. I mean, they go up every year because of the basis of what kids need. We're seeing that. But we also have 29 classrooms in the district today that we didn't have just 10 years ago for special education. Your renovated high school right now, we're looking for space because we have 2, 3 large, we just started a third recently, specialized special ed program for 3 students at a cost of a teacher and a paraprofessional versus $100,000 each to go out of district. Significant savings to our operating budget. So it's been a shift of moving kids back or stopping kids from moving. That's the other thing, is that I'm really proud of what we've saved in saying, well, Mom and Dad, would you consider this program first before we put your child on a 45-minute drive to go to another educational facility? And not all of it works, by the way. I think some of you know this. It's a discussion. It's a collaborative agreement, if you will. We work with Reed's and BICO Collaborative. Those are our 2 public collaboratives that we work with. We prioritize those over private. But we can't mandate it because the parents have the right to programming as well. And I think the last part is being mindful that in general education, we're down 27 teachers in that same span. Here's the problem. I've had to add 19 personnel in special education. So my net, of savings is not the number that you think it would be, because we've made an internal decision to self-start programs. Our biggest increase right now is in paraprofessionals. We're seeing 2, 3, 4 paraprofessionals from September on being hired throughout the year. Student all of a sudden can't be controlled, needs to be in a one-to-one situation, or we need to have the availability of a person for that student, or just to support the classroom. I think the last part is if we were to someday close a building, I would never recommend it be the Yale School, ever. because the L School is the only building where 20 years from now, after I'm dead and gone, you can still add to it. It has some great bones, you know, because of the way it was built. Yes, eventually it's going to need a roof, and eventually it's going to need some new plumbing and heating, but that's not a reason to throw a building away. The the JCS and the LGN give you nothing of that. There's no way to really go backwards at the JCS. You can't go up anymore. And the LGN isn't built to go up. We already have enough parking problems down there as it is to even add any more bodies. So what we said 3 years ago was, we will look at this again once we see how much further decline we're going. Is our predictions correct? Even with the 2,432 students that we had this past year and 110 school choice students, I don't know what the numbers are going to be for this fall, but we have 2 grades coming through that have gone from the traditional, for example, when my wife started here 15 years ago, there was 280 kids in the 6th grade. You know, we're going to go through a situation where we're going to have a discussion about space in the middle school. You know, because if we're down to 490 or 500 students, then I have to look at things. Well, I provide the school committee. They decide. Do we have an early childhood center, kindergarten center, and then move to 2 1-to-5 schools, or 1-to-4 schools, excuse me, and then move the 5th grade into the middle school? Well, that's great, but a decision was made in 1997 to go to a middle school philosophy. You have 3 pods. You have 6 pods, 3 on each floor. So now what happens to your 5th grade? Are they small enough to go into 1 pod? Maybe. You might have to have 28 to 30 in the classroom, which most of us on this side would say is not a good idea. Or do you look at other alternative means? And those are all discussions that I think are going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. Because that's what we said. I mean, in part of the report is we said we are willing to look at this again. Because we're going to have to be part of the efficiency discussion. But I don't think it should be at a cost to rising operational costs in other departments. And I'll give you a perfect example. I do not want to increase spending more than $1.1 million in transportation. I'm going to lose fees that I can charge now, and I know that's a not happy thing, and have to provide free transportation. Well, that's a cost of the operating budget. You know, if I lose $180,000 in fees and I have to add more buses, that's a $360 plus to the budget. It's not just the $180, because I'm going to have more kids that are potentially taking that bus depending on where the kids are located. We already pay more because we transition at grades 4 or 5. Most school systems are K to 5s, pre-K to 5. That's the traditional pre-K to 3 or pre-K to 2, 3 to 5s. We go to 2 different parts of town, and automatically in 4th grade, we have another tier of busing because we have a 4 or 5. We took a lot of heat this past year because we moved 6, 7, and 8 together with 4 and 5. It actually worked out pretty good, to be quite honest, in terms of the day-to-day issues, but it was not an easy start, as many of us know, and I think this year is going to be some of the same thing, although some of the numbers coming from the LGN are lower. That's that one group of kids coming from that side of town. That's a lower number of students. So that actually may help us. And if I may, I might as well, since I'm already rambling. We always say to people, just ask. You come visit the school, take a tour, figure out go ahead, count how many of them are empty. How many rooms aren't being used. We did that with the building committee a few years ago because they had heard that the Hayes 3rd floor was completely nobody there. I'm like, well, I don't know what you want me to do with those 6 classrooms, but there's kids in them. And again, I would reiterate that closing the Hay would be the biggest mistake the school department could make. Are there other options? Go ahead and look at them, that's fine, but it probably, not that I want to make our LGN parents upset, but if we had to have a serious discussion about closing a school and making class sizes 30 kids, then I would say that the LGN is the school that's up for this discussion. Not my vote, by the way, that's the school committee's decision.
A quick question for us non-educators. The 2 collaboratives that you work with, Reads and
FICO.
What are those?
So those are where we send students with certain specific learning disabilities and behavior challenges that we feel over time and parents feel over time isn't working by being in. They're still enrolled with us, but we pay a special fee and transportation for those students to leave the town of Norton and go to that facility and come back home, in most cases, for those 2 collaboratives every day. But we do have kids, we've had kids in the past that are 365 students. They are 365, out of district, they may come home on a weekend and that type of thing, but they sleep there, they eat there, they get educated there, and you pay the brunt, you pay that full cost.
And what other challenges do you foresee in your position going forward, aside from, pupil population maybe decreasing? I know that you've been focusing a lot, Jen, you've done a great job of bullying and the
Yeah.
social emotional piece. Are there other things you think are on the horizon that will present challenges?
I think the biggest challenge before us right now, and I think for the immediate future, is the social emotional. We're just seeing things that we've never seen before. And it doesn't mean that they're bad kids. It means that this is the way that they know how to communicate their need, their inability to handle something. And if you were to, we're really lucky because we have a really understanding fire department and police department. But our schools get visited on a regular basis for some type of situation with a social emotional with a student. I mean, it's hard for a week not to go by for us to not have an ambulance situation. We did make an internal decision, but the police chief and I decided that having the guys in blue show up for those situations was not a good idea. They should go with the people in red because they're known as, firemen are known as, there's an ambulance versus a police officer is, a person that could, quote, arrest them, enforce something. So what we do now is our protocols is we've changed that so we're not having students see that, but the police officer's available to us in the area, if you will, that type of thing. But we've had, we at the high school, I'll give you a perfect example. I just put in for a grant. I don't know if we'll get it, but we're trying. We have a bridge program at the high school for students that are in and out of hospitalization for whatever reason. So mental health, a medical condition that they require to be out of school for 6 weeks, whatever. And we need that bridge program at the middle school because the number of calls for social emotional issues at the middle school is significant. Everything from just students who that's what they know. And how do we transition them back and allow them to be successful while at the same time not stressing? Anxiety and stress is probably the most hurtful thing that I think you can see in a young adolescent. It's just something that completely takes them over. And any of us who have children who have ever seen our children stressed about something as simple as maybe the MCAS test versus boyfriend, girlfriends, questions of sexuality, questions about their home life, parents getting divorced. We've dealt with a couple of major parental situations that were very public in town. We had a situation of a murder. Those things all affect our kids. They don't have to know them. They know the stories. They're planted in front of televisions way too long. Social media, crazy. I mean, I don't think any kid under the age of 13 should have a cell phone, period. I'm never going to be able to enforce that. I did it for my kid. She's just entering 8th grade. She turned 13 in June, and that's when she got her first cell phone. I'm not telling you how to parent. I'm just saying that would resolve a lot of my issues on the day-to-day with the social emotional stuff. Poverty. Don't forget poverty. A rising number for us. Diversity. A rising number. I mean, we're still going to hover right now. We're hovering around 89% Caucasian. But we're seeing that 1-2% little change every year. So that has impacts. I think diversity is a great thing. Myself, I'm an immigrant, so I think having kids from other parts of the world and they want to move to Norton and all of that. But when we did our portrait of a graduate, and I'll finish here, our parents and our teachers and administrators, even people and the kids, really didn't want to talk about cultural competency. You got to talk about cultural competency when you're 90% white. You got to understand the rest of the world when you leave here, right? And again, I'm not saying you have to accept anything. I just think that the real world is out there for kids. So we're making sure that our cultural competencies are around understanding other kids. Proudly, our schools are safe, but as you know, I can't guarantee the safety of anybody anymore. Wish I could. I can never use the word guarantee. I can say we're just trying to do things differently. One of the first ones to have a crisis manual. That was one of the first things I did when I got here. training our crisis team on how to deal with these types of situations, making sure that we know how to deal with a situation without it becoming a public relations nightmare. Those are really, they're really important to our kids. We're having a wonderful debate, as you probably know, about elections. The school should be open for an election, that's great. Who's going to guarantee the safety of 7,000 people entering to a building like we had this past election during the day with kids in it? I'm not saying that we don't have a role, I'm just saying, and I don't think we should hear phrases like overkill because we added 2 more police officers, and there was a cost to it. So now we want to move the election polls, and we'll do that, we'll go through the process. The superintendent does not have any authority on where the town and the school committee can put elections. My goal is to simply say, do we feel that we're safe? Do we have the added support, or do we need to close? It's the school committee that makes that decision. So those are the kind of the big picture. I think the last part is, if you're talking about efficiencies, are we really to have a discussion to stop making the parents in this town have the highest fees in the state? And again, that belongs to the school committee and the superintendent, but that also means, how do you finance that? Our parents have the highest fees for sports and transportation. I think we have to have that more serious discussion about how do we help families. If you're playing a sport at the high school, 2 seasons, that's $700, and if your brother's playing another season, you're over $1,000, and if you both take the bus, you're approaching $2,000. And we have families that are doing that. So just putting that out there.
So any thoughts on how, I like your talk about diversity and low-income housing and these, all these fees that parents are dealing with. How can the town and the town leadership, how can we help the school community? How can we all work together? Do you have any plans
I think
on how we can work together to really embrace these families,
Sure.
celebrate that diversity, and help with those low-income families?
Right. So one of the things that Norton does really, really well is I can reach out to about one definite organization, but 2 or 3 organizations, and if I need to get $250 to a family just to keep them safe for the night or something, Norton is one of the best communities I've ever worked in for that. Those private organizations really do step up, and I won't mention any names because I don't want to toss anything out there and forget something, but I've had multiple conversations this year with those leaders of those groups and said to them, this is what, dad is dying, mom's already died, kids by themselves, we need to find this kid some stability, some clothes, some food, a place to stay, whatever it is. And so Norton is fantastic at that. I think one of the best places that I've ever worked for doing that, really bringing it together, so kudos. I think the only real way is take the 80-page budget that the school department has and question every line item about what the expense, why does the superintendent make that salary? Why does he need this position? Why do they need that position? Some of that's already happening, and I'm glad to say to them, this is why, and this is how come. You can disagree with it. At the end of the year, we transferred $160,000 within our own budget from personnel where I saved money to expenses. I didn't have to come back to the town tax for those monies. That shouldn't be a negative that we're hiding money, or we didn't hide money. We projected certain positions in certain areas. Those projections were somewhat off. We also saved in other areas, and we were able to make those transfers. We didn't have to go request those funds. So I think it's really about taking the biggest budget and asking the questions. Why? Why does it cost $1.6 million for salary raises? Why is it, we had this big discussion in this room with Finance Committee about steps, lanes, and cost of living increases. Well, that's the Massachusetts model. It's been around forever. Administrators should just get a COLA. Okay, so no performance. We're just going to go on COLA. Well, I don't know how fair that is to them. Or let's do performance. Non-union personnel, that makes it easy for me, but I like to see that consistent. Instead, the discussions that we have is, well, we're going to freeze their salaries because we have to pay for these salaries because they're mandates. I don't find that to be equitable at all, especially in an industry where it's probably the only industry where females equate what males make on a given basis. I'm in a predominantly female industry. It's probably the only place where I can actually say, yep, you can, if you start with the male here and a female here, and you have the same degrees and no experience, you're starting at the same place, and you're going up at the same place. So, I think it's getting to the budget, ask the questions, request more information. I mean, we do that, it's an 80-page budget, we're happy to publish it, I'm not sure that it's ever really read, at the bottom number's read. And the mandate, the discussion we had this year is the town of Norton has a requirement to mandates, period. That's your minimum starting point. That's what we presented this year, and we got very close to that. We had to make some tweaks, but we were able to do that at the expense of the general education budget not getting much, less than 1%.
Thinking about the things that are within the Charter Commission's purview specifically, is there any ways that you've thought about that we might be able to provide you some help, assistance, changes?
I would probably say that I don't know how much time you spent on Governor Baker's modernization, Municipal Modernization Act, which was signed a couple of years ago. I would say spend some time reading that, because there are efficiencies that are being recommended in there. For example, the biggest one that hit all of us was the public bid went from 35,000 to 50,000. So now we can get 3 quotes. We don't have to go out. We don't have to do a bid process, which can be very elongated process depending on what project you're doing. So that $15,000 change is a huge difference. Town meeting approving 5-year contracts instead of just 3-year contracts. Mike and I just agreed on one for electricity. I think we're going out for plumbing, electrician, and technicians through the town, so that it's the same company working for the town side as it is the school. They just bill us differently. That's all they have to do, and that's on their end. I think those are things that we're already doing well, and we just need to do more of it. But the Modernization Act is about, it's the governor signing off, and then your local board has to sign off on it. And I don't know where the Board of Selectmen is in that process, so I'm not trying to second guess them. But I think when my office I have to make 3 copies of everything to send to town hall. I know that somebody's going to tell me it's the law, but it's the most inefficient thing I have ever seen in my entire life. And it has nothing to do with the personnel at town hall. I am not finger pointing. But if we have any leeway in a new charter to get rid of some of that, or put it into electronic signature, or any of that, if that's legal to do at the local level and become more efficient, then darn it, let's do it.
So it sounds like you've already adopted some pieces of this Modernization Act.
Yeah, we have. The school department accepted went with the 50,000, the town did too. Our town, our warrants are now signed by one person and entered into the record at the next meeting, so we don't have to spend all that time going through that. So our one person is appointed, and actually we appoint 2. And they just come in and they actually sit in the office and go through all the warrants and ask for secondary information if needed. We've implemented that. Things like, having the ability to have school committee members, selectmen call into a meeting so that you can have a quorum, but maybe you
Remote participation.
Right.
Yeah.
It's been a hot
Yeah, that's always a hot topic. But in today, what people have to remember is that there are, in most cases, people that are in elected office today at the local level do not have a traditional 9-to-5 job. The people that are running don't have a traditional 9-to-5 job. They just don't. They're on a train for hours, right? Especially a community like ours. Or they're traveling. When we did a building project here, when I came here, I happened to be overseas for one of the meetings. Now, I wasn't voting, but I was able to call in and participate in the meeting. I was a non-voting member anyways, but I got to participate in the meeting even though I was on my vacation, and I spent an hour, called in, and I heard what people had to say, made sure that the facts were the facts. That's usually my role. I think any of that stuff in the Modernization Act should be looked at. I think strategic planning is the other one, and then the school department wants to be a partner. And for the naysayers, we're the biggest budget. We have the biggest impact in the town. We have to be part of the solution.
So technically, this is kind of like maybe an all-encompassing kind of question, but, so you think about the charter, like a lot of what we're talking about here is more processes.
Sure.
It's not really, directly related to the charter itself and in the structure of the town. You know, for example, you have a elected board that you report into.
Right.
And then the way you develop your budgets and how it rolls up through town hall and
Right.
the mic into the finance committee and, you know, that process. And ultimately go to town meeting and present it. Is there anything there that, from a government structure and how we run the town, would make your life easier, better, or not even your life, the schools?
So, I was a school committee member in Stoughton for 6 years. And one of the things I loved about that process was that we had 3 members of the finance committee that were a subcommittee on education. So they got to really dig into the budget with us, right? So that they could come back to the whole board and really talk about why there's an increase in this line item, but there's a decrease in this line item, and it's going to cost this, and so on and so forth. And I see that you're talking about Stoughton's charter, which, by the way, they're under review as well. And they have a representative town meeting, and I was a representative town meeting member until this year. I actually didn't seek re-election and been involved since the 90s. Your capital planning is what they're trying to move towards, because it's a separate committee, right? It accepts things from all departments, and it makes a decision as a recommendation to FinCom, the Board of Selectmen town meeting, right? That's, to me, is the process. They have it, but we don't have like an intergovernmental relations committee. Stoughton does, as an example. Again, it just happens that you had Stoughton on there and I live there. I think those things lead to, A, more people involved, different views, and potentially some efficiencies. But I really like the idea of having a subcommittee of 2 or 3 FinCom members that can really look at my budget and say, well, why do you pay for this and you pay for that? Instead, what I get now is public information requests, and I'm like, just call the office, whatever you want. I mean, I just think that would make us more efficient. So you would have to have another group that does public safety. So you'd have a subcommittee on public safety, subcommittee on education, subcommittee on whatever the different combinations of departments would be. So that people can really look into the budget and ask more questions, and therefore be provided questions ahead of time. And again, I think FinCom does what it can with what it has. And it's a recommendation to town meeting, and then town meeting's open, so it depends on who shows up and how important the questions are for them.
Next question.
Absolutely.
So I actually like those ideas of the subcommittees. I think it's very good for collaboration. But in a direct question in regards to the charter, like the charter itself, and I understand why you've got so many state requirements that the school committee and yourself are mandated to, but the charter is very light on the role of the superintendent and the school committee.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to see more definition in terms of what you do, in terms of the role of the superintendent within the charter? Would you like to see that expanded? Because it is very
Right.
light on.
I think you would find that in most charters. You know, the catch-22 of it is the superintendent's always going to want, who do I answer to? Right? I answer to one board of 5 people. I need a majority vote, you know, one on whatever. So how does that work, you know, with, you know, people always, Mike Units is not my boss. The board is. He's the boss of everybody else, though. So I'm the only excluded department that's not part of that. That doesn't stop me from attending department head meetings or, you know, any of those types of collaborations. I just don't know how you would do it within the charter and then within the state regulations. I'd have to defer that to somebody that's smarter than I am. I'm not against it. I mean, the question becomes that I would pretty much have limited to no say. However, you could have a charter that says that there will be a director of technology for the town, of which the superintendent and the town manager will oversee that person. That could be in your charter. I don't see why that couldn't. Maybe, I mean, I defer to the legal minds, but so those are the things where now I'm being held accountable to my board, that I have a responsibility for that position, which requires collaboration, communication, and all that with the town manager or their subordinate if he or she provides that to someone else.
So historically, those three roles that you mentioned, much earlier in the conversation, I think it was the technology,
Yeah.
facilities,
And
and
HR.
HR. Have those always been shared positions with town?
No, and it's, and I have to be quite honest, it is a mixed bag of how it works. There are some towns where it works beautifully, and some towns, it's a national disaster. It's a crisis.
Where they share it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, again, I'm not against it because I think, I don't have that long before I retire, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't be against it if it makes us more efficient. I don't hold back if I don't like something. So if it happens that it's the town manager and I are in charge of a personnel person, and I'm not getting what I need, somebody's gonna know about it. But our relationship is strong enough where we don't have to have those types of conversations very often. I mean, again, we disagree on a lot of things, but it's not a cat and mouse type of situation. But having the superintendent of schools or the town manager deal with HR issues on a day-to-day basis is a lot. It just takes you away from the things that we should be doing. Personnel issues happen on the town side and the school side. So having somebody who understands, they still have to go to somebody, but the idea of, okay, we're following the law, blah, 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 blah. These are the two options. If the superintendent or the town manager has to do the step, you might as well kill the 8-hour day.
Yeah.
So now you're paying somebody 6 figures to do something that you should be awaiting, and I would say due process is the most important, right? I have to deal with unions, the town side deals with unions, but even non-union personnel, due process is the most important thing that we have. And we have to follow that due process, or else we get ourselves into some difficult situations.
Can I ask a follow-up question? One of the things that I do see in other charters that I've looked at is a little more detail in the budget process. So you
Sure.
mentioned something about the 5-year plan, the strategic plan
Mm-hmm.
as a recommendation. But I'm wondering if there are other things, because there's nothing, again, there's no mention of you in this
Right.
budget process. Is
Right.
there, some charters list so many days ahead of time, the superintendent and town manager sit down
Right.
and do
Yes,
whatever.
a lot of towns in this area have budgets due by December 31st or January 1st. There's good and bad to that. The negative to that is House 1 doesn't come out until late January, so you're really not knowing what your numbers are gonna look like from the state. But the positive of that is that it allows for us, and Michael and I do have discussions on what's the budget looking like. We're having a town meeting in the fall, we're gonna talk about free cash, what's it look like, what are the priorities of the school department, what do the capital items look like, and then recommendations are made and we go from there. But I think you'll find that besides changing some dates and the process and who's doing it, under Chapter 70, it predominantly, the school budget belongs to the school committee. They have autonomy on that. It's what ticks everybody off all the time. They're the only board that controls those funds. What the town can do is have a process that maybe starts a little earlier or later, or whatever people think is the right process.
Do you think that would be helpful in this
I don't think it
case?
hurts.
Yeah.
I don't think it hurts because, we're coming to a place in the next few years where, like, adding tons of position is not something that we're looking at. What we're doing is if our enrollment comes down, we're shifting positions. That may cause a layoff. We don't need a grade 1 teacher, but I need another high school math teacher. So I'm shifting to a different person, and I might lose a body, but I'm gaining a body over here because that's where the numbers are. But we've survived on not adding new positions in the last few years, or tons of new positions as we asked for. And now I think, for example, this year we had 3 teachers retire after June 1st, including one on the last day of school. Well, that's great. The problem is it depends on what department they're in. For our elementary, secondary education, there's a difference in there. FinCom has asked me to present all transfers, send it to them and all that. I haven't done the transfers for last year yet because my board is not voting on it until September. And my big sticking point is that the board should vote on that before I send it and make it public. I'm always going to go back and say that having a subcommittee within the finance role for departments, I think would be beneficiary. It's
So-
not a great idea or, you know, a out-of-the-box idea, but I think it would make sense.
I think I've heard some conversations in past meetings about Board of Selectmen, FinCom, and school committee kind of having members that attend each other's meetings.
Yeah, so,
kind of
and they're ad hocing
looking
right
for a little
now.
bit more structure around
Right.
that, is that what it is?
Yeah, they have an ad hoc running committee right now, 2 selectmen, 2 school committee members, and I believe 2 FinCom members that have been meeting. They actually just asked us for, by October 1st, to really take a look at our needs budget. What do you really need to run the school department over the next few years? What positions would you need? What kind of money do you think you're gonna have to expend? So I've been requested to put that together for, by October 1st. I think that's going in the right direction, right? Because now you can make some really difficult decisions. Again, except for mandates that I can't have no control over, I might not get the blah blah position or the blah blah X number of dollars for this new initiative because 2 other departments are in front of me right now. And you know what? I have to deal with that. I might not like it, but at least now I know, guess what? I'm FY22, that's when I'm gonna get it. So now I can start planning for that. Again, if it's a mandated position, I don't have a choice. That's the killer for my department. But if it's something where, okay, we want librarians in every school. Okay, well, guess what? We're gonna add X in the police department, Y in the fire department, highway department. Those are all gonna be first because we're really low on people and the town is growing and all that. So I know I'm getting it 4 years from now. Okay, so now we can start taking a look at that efficiency and will that be the best decision for us 4 years from now? We may have to change it because things have changed. You know, down the line, you're probably gonna need, I wouldn't be too shocked, I might not be here, but I think you're gonna need a director of ELL. It's gonna happen. Somebody who oversees Eagle language learners, which is part of the state mandate on positions. It's a mandate. Once you get to 100 students in the same language, you have to have a full-time director. So what does that mean? Well, we're still away from that, but we're seeing the demographic shift in terms of students.
So that's for students that English isn't their first language?
Correct.
Gotcha.
And that, you're touching a little bit on one question I had, it was in regards to your overall admin team. You know, what does it consist of? Do you feel it's sufficient? What is it lacking? How does it compare to other towns?
Well, we spend per student almost $200 to $300 less. If you take a look at our comparables on the most released audited numbers, you can, if you look at local, then you look at our comparable districts, and then you look at the default, you'll see that we're negative in all of those. Our biggest hole in those areas, I'm pretty lucky to have had a school committee that supported the director of technology and bringing it back, reinstating it. It's not new. Reinstating the director of facilities. We have an early childhood coordinator / assistant principal at the JCS because we have over 600 people in that building. And our fastest growing program is preschool. We're going to be at about 110. By the way, we just lost Chris Kiefer. She's just resigned, going to another district as a principal. But we don't have that mid-level management position anywhere in the district. So you got central office and you got building level administrators. There's nothing in between. You go to nearby districts, you got your reading director, you got your social studies director. We don't have any of those, but we have stipends that go to teachers, but they can't evaluate them. They can't reprimand them. They don't supervise them. We don't have.
Any department heads?
We have department heads, but non-supervisory, non-evaluative. They're only observations. They cannot write up a colleague in their department for anything. They either observed the teaching, in other words, whatever the form we're using, they either observed it or they didn't observe it, but that doesn't mean anything. It still falls to the building level administrator. So my building level administrators spend more time on evaluation than any of the local people do. And for those of us in education, we know that system, we're hearing some rumblings that that's going to change, but right now, if you need to put a teacher on an improvement plan, it's a good process of paperwork and recommendations and due process. So what we did, I took some heat, a perfect example, we had a director of counseling position, coordinator of counseling position, and we elongated into director of counseling and SEL. So that person is at the high school, they're physically at the high school, they have day-to-day responsibilities at the high school, but they are also supporting pre-K through 8 because of their background, being from the world of a clinician, on how do we deal with the SEL issues that we have in the district. My peer districts have a coordinator of guidance, And now they're adding director, the fastest growing position in public ed right now is director of SEL.
But how come your department heads can't evaluate?
Because they're Unit A members, they're in the same union. So if you're in the same union, most likely in public ed, they're not evaluating. And if they are, you don't have a leg to stand on if you go to arbitration, because they belong to the same
Teach
union.
5 class, do they teach?
They teach 4 instead of 5. So they have an administrative period, teach 4, and a prep period.
What is an SEL? I apologize.
Some social emotional learning.
Okay.
That's okay, we're full of acronyms that we always have to explain ourselves. So we don't have that flow.
Is that a budgetary issue?
Full, yeah.
That's what it is?
That's a full budgetary issue.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I came forward, to be quite honest, I'd probably ask for 2 people for 6 to 12 or K to 12. I wouldn't say, I need pre-K to 5s, and then I need 6 to 8, and then I mean, my high school has a principal and assistant principal who can evaluate, and the director does the guidance staff, support staff. Middle school, assistant principal, principal, that's it. There is no middle management there whatsoever. And same thing at the elementary school.
And you said you need 2 because there's so many issues in those age groups.
Well, there's the expertise. So think about it, 25 years ago when you went to the doctors, your doctor pretty much gave you everything that you needed right there and then. Now they send you to every specialist in the world. Our industry is the same way. We've become overly, in my opinion, in some ways, overly specialized. But because of the frameworks and the way it happens, it's not, you have that connection between 6 to 12 where you can observe and you can say, well, I observed you doing this. But you can't evaluate and say, well, you need to improve in this.
Yeah.
Because evaluation has judgment. Observation does not have judgment. So those are the rules we have to play by. And that's not unusual. So we have, to kind of go through, we have superintendent, assistant superintendent, director of technology, business manager, director of PPS. There's a perfect example of support. We have a director of pupil personnel services with no other special ed evaluation, support of evaluation of staff and classrooms at all. We cut that, the assistant sped director position 2 years ago. So that's an area of priority because the building levels have to count solely on their principals. Well, I can assure you, if somebody's been in this business for almost 30 years, not every principal has the expertise on specialized programming that you would want them to have because they have the entire building. Some people today would say, well, that's a waste of money. I would make the argument that those people are holding general educators. I mean, I always say that if you want to solve special education problems with teaching and learning, solve general education. That'll get you the answer. Teachers have to be more flexible and understanding of some of the needs of kids instead of just special ed or ELL. I don't know if that helps. And then we have the director of SEL counseling is at the high school based and then oversees SEL district-wide, principal, assistant principal. I mean, we have 745 kids. That building should have 2 assistant principals in today's day and age of discipline. Our kids aren't any worse than any other place I've ever worked, so let's keep that here. But at the end of the day, the issues that we're seeing are more significant, and they require, you can no longer suspend a student from school. You have to go through a process of trying to find alternative means besides just kicking them out of school. Vaping is a perfect example. We all know that sending kids home during the days of smoking probably didn't help us anything because they went home and smoked after mom and dad left. Well, vaping is the same thing, so they're asking us to come up. It used to be that if you suspended a student, if they were in a special education student, you had to provide services right away. Within 24 to 48 hours, the tutor or seeing the kid after school had to be implemented. Now it's all students. If you're going to suspend a student, you must provide by statute parent coming in and communicating. So what happens if mom and dad work in Boston? I have to put that student out for up to 2 days while I'm doing the investigation, an emergency placement, but that doesn't necessarily count as a suspension. Those are all laws that came into place in 2012. There's a body that's needed for that. It's that simple. We're not doing with it.
I have one last question, if that's
Sure.
okay. And I'll ask it because I heard you mention retirement 2 times. You were over here. With the appointment process, I know that the school committee is responsible
Yeah.
for the hiring. But with the appointment process, are town leaderships or officials part of any type of exploratory or interviewing committee? when it-
They were for me, yeah.
For you?
Yep, yep, I had a Board of Selectmen member,
Okay.
and I had FinCom member. I had student, teachers, parents, retirees. That was for mine,
Okay.
7 years ago. And I'm not, I still got 7 years to go. So if no, and I signed
I'm not
it.
pushing you out the door.
No, I signed an
That's it.
extension to stay, but, you know, you never know. Things
Yeah.
change, committees change, priorities change.
I was just curious if there was something, if it was just precedent, or if it.
Yeah,
was
it's always,
mandated.
they've always reached out to the town side, from what I've been told, because that was one of the questions that I had when I was asked to interview. I asked, so who's in the room?
Mhm.
And they said, well, we're going to have a representative from this. So we had a Board of Selectmen
Okay.
member, FinCom member, who's now a selectman. So that's the process. Yep.
Any other questions?
Oh, I think that's quite a bit there.
It was.
Apologize, I probably rambled on forever.
Was there anything else you wanted to bring up that we didn't ask, or?
No, again, I think efficiency is good. I'm really wondering which road you folks are going to decide to recommend and go, because there's so many different things you can do, but at the same time, Norton's a good place. And, you know, you folks are lucky enough to live in the town, and I think its school system does a great job. And as you all know, I choose to send my daughter here. So I must think something about the district. If you take your own, and I only have one, so I better get it right the first time, or I'm going to be in trouble.
Well, thank you. I have three daughters in the system, 2 in high school, and one over at the, where is she? She's at the Yale.
Yeah, you got the gap. That's a good thing.
That's where she is, so.
Thank you
My pleasure.
very much for your time, we
The,
appreciate it.
Thank you.
School year, I apologize, I'm not in suit and tie, but
For all your time.
it's the summertime.
Yeah.
So, no.
Have a great night.
Thanks, you as well. Okay. We got on time. Okay, getting back to the agenda. What's next? Oh, acceptance of minutes from last meeting, July 22nd.
Oh, I printed my own out, you know. Thank you.
Cut that.
We all set with minutes? I don't want to rush.
Move to accept the minutes?
I'm just making sure everybody's all set. I will take a motion to accept the minutes of July 22nd.
So moved?
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay. Admin items. Dr. Byetta had touched on it a little bit. Board of Selectmen took up remote access at the last meeting. From what I understand, Mike Units is supposed to be reaching out to various boards and committees and trying to determine their need for remote access. I can't imagine there's a group that doesn't want it, but he was also going to be speaking with other towns that have adopted it and see how it's working and if they have any recommendations or any changes they would have done. There's a technology question that seems to be up in the air. Brad and Mike seemed to indicate that we had the equipment available, although there seems to be question as to whether we actually do have it and where it is, but it is not hooked up and nobody is aware of how to use it. So there may be a learning curve there, but if the technology actually exists and there is a spoken need for it, it seems like we could get it sooner rather than later. I think the issue would probably come down to getting it installed and getting people up to date in how to run it.
It's a real shame that if we have two members, I think we're missing two members tonight, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm guessing at least one of them would have probably remoted in tonight if we could have. Just knowing the people.
Yeah, I'm not
I
exactly.
have no idea what they're
Yeah.
up to, but the,
No, both of them were work-related, one of which I don't think was
Yeah.
probably going to be allowed to
I think it's a shame.
remote
You know,
participate.
And it's certainly a shame they don't have the opportunity to.
Yes.
And if it's coming down to a technology issue that we can't figure out where the phone equipment is,
Yeah,
it's kind of frustrating, I guess.
yeah. Well, the good news is the Board of Selectmen tasked Mike Units with getting that information for the upcoming meeting, so hopefully we'll have more clarity and a little bit more resolution by our next meeting.
Great.
So.
That's great.
On Dropbox, you may have seen, I think it was David, no, I forget, somebody had asked where I was finding the information on the population, and there was a chart that we had combined with the types of government with population data, and I put that out on Dropbox, but I'm about to update it again because the Secretary of State had charts of voter registration levels by state, by town, excuse me. So I combined that in there as well. And the one issue, so I did some percentages to try and determine percentage of registered voters of the population. The problem is that the voter registration data is up to date through February of 2019. Population data is based on the census, so it is 10 years old at this point. So if you look, there was a small town in, I forget if it's Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard, they had 297 residents, and now they have 311, so their voter registration is like 111%. So the small towns
Right.
percentages are going to be a little skewed, but I'll get that up at some point in the next 2 weeks, so you can see that as well. And that's, I think, did anybody else have any administration issues? Okay. Peter, anything you wanted to talk about?
Nope.
Okay, good news. All right, we've gone through interview, survey, status update. Dave last evening got to me the link for the final survey, and he also put together a PDF that we can use as the paper copy of the survey, and it's in your packet. So let's start with the paper survey. This is pretty much what Dave had provided. What I did do was add a footnote at the bottom that just instructed people to leave the survey in the envelopes that are provided. And then I also put our website on there in case somebody needed more information. And the intent is this would go to Town Hall and to the Council on Aging. And we'll provide them with envelopes. Denise reached out to Beth. She was agreeable to making space for them, and I reached out to Lucia. She said the same. So if looking this over, anybody has any questions or comments or changes they'd like to make, get back to me fairly quickly, as we're probably going to be printing them off and making them available at some point this week. Kevin agreed to drop them off at both locations, and he also agreed on a periodic basis to collect the responses, which is great.
Just a quick-
Yes.
Any idea where in Town Hall they would be?
No, I don't know. I'm going to have to bring him, he's going to have to bring him to Lucia. I assume there's a table in this hallway underneath the bulletin board, so I'm hoping, we can put them there and then put the envelope, just literally tack it to the wall.
Yeah. 'Cause
And
I was just
collect them.
thinking, we definitely wanted like a public area.
Yeah, Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, they're going to be, security is going to be an issue. Somebody could just grab them and walk off with them, and there's not much we're going to be able to do about it. We have to hope that most people are just going to choose to do the survey online.
Quick question on
Yeah.
dropping them off at the COA. Beth had suggested, and we had talked about before, someone kind of almost talking about like what the surveys are for, the purpose of them.
Yes,
When he does that, maybe coordinate with Beth,
yes,
kind of that introductory,
yes.
all right.
Yeah, he also had agreed, and I think at the last meeting, you had also mentioned that you would be willing to, if we wanted to maybe take a couple of dates where they've got some high attendance. Kevin agreed, he didn't mind going in and speaking to the folks that might be available about what the Charter Commission is and what we do, and would
So should I
appreciate.
reach out to Kevin to coordinate?
Yeah, if you don't mind. He's in this week. I think he said he was leaving on the 9th for vacation. He did mention that, you know, and I think he's back the 19th. I may have my dates wrong. He did mention if, you know, he was needed on a day during that time frame, he could come in. But I don't think it's mission critical. I think it's probably the best to coordinate with Beth and determine when she sees, you know, the highest number of people in and get more bang for our buck.
Yep.
But it probably wouldn't hurt to go maybe a couple of times, maybe even a little bit later in the process, just as a reminder on a different date with a different group.
So in the meantime, we're gonna drop off the surveys though there and
Yes, I'm going to print them off. I'm going to make the envelopes. One of the things that all of this, I had to kind of put a timeline together, or order of events. So when I got the link last night, the first thing I did this morning was I went to the Norton Media Center and gave them, if you look in your stapled packet, a quick bulletin, so that they would make us a nice JPEG like they did for the public hearing. That JPEG, we're allowed to use it, which is nice, and that's more of the method to my madness. So they would post it on the community pages on the local access stations. We can use it to put on the Norton news page. We can use it in all of our social media campaign, so we can put it on Facebook. So we kind of have a coordinated survey campaign, so that everybody is sort of used to what that image looks like and know, oh, all right, that's the Charter Commission survey. So I started this morning, and I noticed as soon as I had sent it that I had mentioned paper surveys will also be available at Town Hall. I forgot to mention the Senior Center. When I get the draft of the JPEG, I'll just ask them to make that quick update. So once we have that available, then I need to update the webpage. And if you turn to the second page, there's a few different areas. We're gonna hit them on all fronts. So on our page alone, what I'm proposing amending, starting with the red banner, there's a inset picture up in the top right corner, the Conservation Committee. Apparently, we have the ability to get a second banner in addition to the Norton Alerts one. So we're gonna have that brought over to our page to announce that we have a survey available. The page immediately behind this picture, because when you click on it, it says read more, and when you click on it, it actually opens to a new page. So that new page text is going to be directly behind the page that we're currently looking at, and it's just going to make them aware, Charter Commission online survey now available, and it'll have a direct link within that alert, or that alert page, so they can access it there. That's the first spot. We're going to remove under news and announcements the public forum, because that's long past. We're going to replace it with our JPEG from the Norton Media Center, which, as I said, is also going to go on the town's main page. On the top left is general information, so we're going to replace the public hearing notice there again with a link strictly just saying Charter Commission survey. When they click on that link, it'll directly bring them into the survey. And we're going to do the same, the very last page in this packet is an update to the Charter Commission's main webpage. So everything that's not in yellow is what's presently out there. At the bottom, I'm just going to do a update, just saying, as of August 2019, we're in the process of meeting with various folks. We're going to be moving on to these other folks in the fall. And again, just kind of reiterating, we also made a survey. So if they can't find the link to the survey at this point, I think I've got it covered. So that's where the links are going to be. Once that is done, I'm going to come to Janie and have you do the campaign on social media, on Norton Neighbors, Invest in, Norton Connect, and then I will send out on the front page of your stapled package, I tested it this afternoon to myself. We'll send out a Norton alert. Actually, this says text message. It's technically an email message. So everybody, right now there are 4,923 people signed up to get general alerts via email. So we should be able to hit a really good number of folks. And this is what I'm proposing within the text of that email. So there's a direct link to the survey, and then I have also made available, if they, have no idea what the Charter Commission is and need more information, I've provided a link there. And I've also mentioned that paper survey and collection envelopes are available at Town Hall and Senior Center in the event, again, that somebody does not want to go directly to that online survey. That's and that's the last step. And at some point, I will probably do a refresher. We may want to talk about refreshing the entire campaign, social media-wise. We'll leave the Norton Media Center bulletin up probably and through, I'm thinking, late fall. When we decide to, take it down, all we need to do is let them know. But we should probably, depending on what kind of feedback we've gotten, we may want to do a second campaign and just remind people that there is a survey out there if they haven't yet already done so.
So is this saying that 4,923 people will get this text message?
Yes,
They signed up for general?
they signed up for general
gonna be
alerts.
Email,
not a
sorry.
text message.
Yep,
Sorry, email.
yep.
So like some of you only checked off.
If they only checked off,
I only want high alert things, they won't get this.
no.
Right.
Yeah. So if they have opted out of the general alerts from the town, then no, they will not get this. But as of right now, there's 4,900, so it's
Pretty good.
it's a good amount, yeah. Between that and I think the various Norton Facebook pages, we should be able to get a couple of thousand. I'm assuming there'll be some overlap, but
I make a suggestion about the Facebook.
Yeah.
Can you post it on the Norton Alert Facebook page and then have Janie share it from there? Because that's shareable. The groups aren't shareable.
okay. All right, so we'll start with that.
Share it from like the Norton Neighbors page.
Okay,
But if you had it in the Norton Alerts, then it could be shared from there.
okay. All right, if you want to, what I'll probably do is just take some sort of subset of what we've got in here with the JPEG, and we'll post that, and I will let you know. You'll see when it's available.
You say it's going to be on the cable too?
What's that?
You say it's going to be on the Norton cable too?
Yep, so the JPEG that the Norton Media Center is creating for us actually goes, Peter actually does their narration.
Yep.
So there's community bulletins that post, I don't even know how, every once in a while you'll flip through and you'll see kind of just updates and bulletins. So we'll be part of that. So that JPEG will be on the local cable access channels probably a few times a day.
Okay.
So, and within that, I made a decision. I figured unfortunately, the URL for the survey, you can see it on the front page here under the Norton Alerts. It wasn't something that's going to translate terribly easily. Nobody was going to be able to grab a pen and write that down quick enough, and it was a fairly jumbled URL. So on the community page bulletin, I just said, please go to the Norton Mass Charter Commission webpage, and like I said, and that's why I provided so many different spaces where they can find that, the link to the survey. So. Does anybody have any other comments or suggestions on the survey?
That looked great.
Okay. Great. I'm hoping we can have that all done, or I can have my portion of it done by the end of the week. And we'll see how we get from there. Okay. Dedham Charter. Oh, sorry. We need to back up. Sorry, under interviews, the upcoming schedule and updates, we've got a couple of things we need to talk about. The first of which is we are going to have to cancel, I know you're going to be devastated, August 26th, which was that one extra day that we were going to try and get in, so we would have back-to-back meetings. But unfortunately, the Board of Selectmen took that date for the special town meeting that's coming up for the Bremer Bio. So Sandy's already rescheduled. I know we had Lucia, and I don't remember who else we had originally had scheduled, but, so we are no longer meeting on August 26th. You can take that out of your calendar. The other issue that came up in the Board of Selectmen meeting last week was the Fall Town meeting is October 21st, which is one of our scheduled dates to meet. So I wanted to discuss whether we wanted to move our meeting date. I don't want to skip it. I would like to move it and get an idea of when people would be comfortable with moving that. My thought was maybe just move it to that following Tuesday, the 22nd. But I'm open to other suggestions if people have an issue with that.
I'm good with the 22nd. Once I get back to school, I just have to check my calendar and make sure I don't have anything going on that night in
Okay.
terms of parents, open house, things like that.
But you won't know until school starts?
I won't know until I get their schedule.
Okay. Anybody else have an issue with October 22nd instead of the 21st?
Think I have an issue?
Yeah,
What's that?
I don't know my schedule yet.
I was just gonna say, I have no idea, but in general, I would say it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second that.
All right. Okay. We just have to kind of, we need to be able to commit to it because Sandy has to be able to schedule people for those
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
dates.
Yeah.
Do we feel comfortable voting on that tonight, or do we want to wait?
I don't think a lot of us are probably even gonna know until September, right? When it-
No, I don't think so, but I
It's
mean, I
got-
think in
but
general, most of us.
I don't know what else
Okay.
we can do besides just
Yeah,
have it.
all right.
think
Let's
in
just,
general-
we'll knock on wood, we have a quorum.
I was saying, I'm assuming between the 9 of us, we'll have enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of us are available on Tuesdays, I think.
Right.
Not speaking for everybody.
I don't know whether the room is available, but I'll find out. Okay. Nobody has an issue? We'll move forward with the 22nd in lieu of the 21st for the second October meeting. Okay. So that's done. Sorry. Okay, we can move on to Dedham. Let's see. All right, so Town of Dedham has a population of 24,729, of which 18,950 are registered voters, or 76%. They have a representative town meeting form of government. They have 5 Board of Selectmen and a strong town manager. And again, just keeping in mind things we may want to look at or adopt in our charter going through. Did anybody have anything in section 1 or section 2?
So in Article 2, I thought it was an interesting contrast with Plymouth, how they allocated their representatives per precinct. In Plymouth, they said, 9 per precinct, but didn't identify how many precincts and
Right.
didn't sort of specify what would happen if the precincts changed based on population, whereas this sort of sets a number that they want to be on, in the representative body, and sort of gets, describes how you get to that number. So,
Yep.
I thought that was an interesting difference.
I looked it up, they have 273 present members.
Any idea how many of those are appointed versus elected?
The representative,
Yeah,
Meaning because they don't run,
right. I'm just throwing that out.
because they don't, if they don't have, if they don't run. if they
Oh,
don't
oh,
run,
oh, oh,
they
oh.
Fill the spots.
no,
I don't, and I could ask that question with any town, I was just
Yeah.
curious.
no, there, I'm not even sure where you would find that information,
Yeah.
other than going through their minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
something that they're
not
gonna publish.
identified, they're not identified separately.
They don't
No.
tell us, 'cause
No,
that-
they
that
just,
would-
they just
right.
list
Yeah, they
the,
wouldn't want to
Yeah,
do
the
that, right?
members, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure they're gonna be calling well, I wouldn't want to be calling attention to.
No, I know, no, I
Yeah.
get it. No, I know when I read these a lot, I get into, I try to figure out why they do things like they do, or don't,
Yeah.
and you don't know the history sometimes.
There are some things in here that, not in here specifically, but as I'm reading charters where there's just something so wacky, I'm like, all right, something really
Yeah, something really.
went down in this
Right,
town,
right,
yeah.
You know, and it just- but it could be a very valid reason.
Yes.
You know, and-
For them,
Right.
yep. The one thing that I found interesting and they did a little differently than Plymouth was in 212, the referendum petition. They have another backstop. And I'm not saying I agree with the percentages, but they did have a backstop and they, I gotta find it, it's the, finding paragraphs here are hard. I'm gonna call it the second paragraph where it starts off with all votes shall be taken by official ballot. That closing clause, no action of the representative town meeting shall be reversed unless at least 20% of the voters eligible to vote in the election participate by voting in the election. So essentially, they've got a backstop in there that even if they've gathered enough signatures within the prescribed timeline to get a referendum called, if they don't get 20% of the public to come and vote on it, it's not valid.
Which is a high number.
It is a very high
Yeah,
number.
keep in mind, we have not
18,000
had
registered
20%
voters.
Yeah.
of regular elections.
It was.
We have not had 20% of
Right.
regular elections, even
Right.
our well-attended
Yeah.
elections.
20% didn't vote us in.
Yeah.
Yeah. 20% of 18,000 is a lot.
Yes. What is it? 30, it was almost 3,800 they would need.
And if I read it correctly, it says if you don't have that 20%, then that is automatically null and void.
Yeah, the referendum does not go through, yeah. So I like it as a backstop. I'm not crazy about the percentage, but I would like to maybe talk about that at a future date. Anything else? Section 2?
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Section 3?
Section 3, so they require, Dedham requires 50 registered voters to sign nomination papers for town elections.
Which clause are you in?
31E. So this is not for the town, the representative town meeting members.
Yep.
Those only need 10. But I wondered if that encouraged more people to run. We require 200
Yeah.
signatures, and that might seem daunting. Now, I don't know that that's the reason that they did it, but I wondered if that was the effect, if they, were able to encourage more people to go, because, and I don't know if it's a good thing, you want to show that there's support for a candidate before they run.
Yep.
But just something to think about in terms of the requirements to get on the ballot.
Who required 200?
Doesn't the town of Norton require 200?
No, we only needed 50. too, 50 for the,
Oh, I thought
200 for a special town meeting. Is that what you're thinking of? To call a special town meeting, you
Yeah, I
need
think to
200?
run on the
Oh,
Charter
maybe
Commission, we
that's what it
needed
was.
50.
50
Okay.
For like this.
Yeah.
to run for this.
I had 200 in my head for the boards.
Section 310, their Parks and Recs Commission appoint their own director and can remove them.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting to have annually appointed
Yes.
by their board.
And they also appear to have a combined planning and ZBA. Which it could just be the makeup of the town. If it's, mostly developed already, there's probably not a lot of need for zoning bylaw amendments, but I thought that was interesting.
The commissioners of trust funds made me kind of wonder how many, I was meant to look up how many trust funds did they have.
I don't know, yeah,
I
that,
that too, I'm like, who's leaving what?
Yeah.
That you need a whole committee.
Yeah.
well, again, it's one of those things you wonder if it came up because of some incident or mismanagement, and that's how they,
We have the Hicks
We have
fund,
one,
right?
yeah,
And then,
that I know of.
and who, is that in our charter, who manages that, or is that just in our?
Board of
it's the Board of
Right,
Selectmen.
Is that in our charter, or is that just?
Yeah, we got the
I don't
Hicks
think it's in the
Fund.
charter.
I think,
I don't think it's in the
I
charter.
don't think it's in the charter. There's not much in the charter.
It's probably in the trust, it's probably in the trust document, would be my guess.
I remember reading about it, I thought it was in the charter, I could be wrong.
I think it was in the trust doc.
That would make more, to me, that would make more sense, like,
Yeah, I think you're right.
you play
Okay.
this.
Can we go back to 3.8 for a second?
Sure.
I was looking at 3.8, the moderator. I feel like we've heard a lot about that from a lot of different people in terms of appointments. But then when I was reading, it said, let's see, the moderator shall provide and regulate the procedure at all town meetings, appoint the finance warrant commission, established by clause, paragraph 3. Such committees as may be authorized by the representative town meeting and such other committees created by the moderator from time to time solely to advise the moderator on matters within the moderator's jurisdiction. And I didn't see anything like that in our town charter.
We have something where the moderator.
Yeah, they can create their own committee.
I don't know if it's
Okay.
worded the same way, but
Well, because my thought was, I feel like we've heard so much about the moderator and the moderator's appointments, I thought this almost opens the door for the moderator to have a committee to help appoint people to the finance committee, which I think is one of the biggest complaints that we've heard. And I didn't know if this was in our charter. It's not in there.
Do we have
I
something
have it
that's
here,
worded
hold on.
differently?
it is worded, yeah.
Worded differently?
Yeah.
Says that he appoints the.
And there was a question
that's
as
what
to
I thought.
exactly, yeah, all right, moderator shall appoint members of, here it is.
So the town moderator shall be the presiding officer of the town meeting, and shall appoint the finance committee, all other standing committees of the town meeting, and all committees authorized by the town meeting for a primarily legislative purpose.
Yeah, and if you look at 2.3, subject to the provisions of the charter and bylaws or other town meeting votes regarding committees as provided, the moderator shall appoint for fixed term the members of such committee of the town meeting, special or standing, as may from time to time be established. In addition to such specific powers, duties, and responsibilities, the as may be provided in a town meeting committee, or to a town meeting committee, by the bylaw or vote establishing it, each such committee, when acting within the scope of its authority, shall have the right to examine the pertinent records of any town agency or consult with it reasonable times any town officer, employee, or agent. Which I have a lot of questions associated with exactly what that is. But this seems to be similarly
Just a thought I had when I was
Related.
reading it.
But you're right, I think
Yeah.
that one opens it up, versus the language sounds more like they could
Yeah.
create a committee to
Right.
appoint FinCom.
Correct.
Whereas this doesn't sound like that.
Yeah, that one's, were you just reading from ours?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very wordy too.
Yeah.
Very wordy. Something to think about.
Yeah.
Laura, just on the same topic of the moderator, I think for all of the charters that we've seen, the moderator has similar powers to appoint the finance committee in each of these towns.
I think so.
And I wonder if Lauren could tell us if any town does it differently, because we heard a couple of suggestions for different ways to appoint a finance committee, and
Specifically to appoint the finance committee?
yeah, that's been mentioned at a couple of meetings from witnesses, and so I didn't know if there was a town that did it differently. It seems like this is a pretty common practice, so
Yeah,
that's why.
it does seem standard.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a mention towards the bottom of that moderator section that says, the research activities of moderators under the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth. So I'm wondering if there's something in our state regulations that, like, provide for that.
Possibly. We're supposed to be looking into that. It's on my list. It's on my list.
I think, though, so much of it is gonna depend on what legislative branch we end up
It
choosing.
absolutely is.
because,
I
I think it is interesting that RTM and Open Town Meeting both seem to have a moderator. I think when we move on to town council, there is no
Yeah.
moderator.
Yeah.
So that changes.
But just in terms of examining the town meeting forms,
Right,
it might be
right.
interesting to see
Right.
if anybody has done it the way that, Mike Units
Right.
suggested, or,
Well, it would be
whatever.
interesting to see how different town councils do it, because if they don't have a moderator, they must have a different mechanism. So I wonder if those are all the same, in terms of how they.
Right, well, it would,
or
it
if
would
they
be
even- or Actually, a lot
different.
of them don't even have FinCom, so
Right,
that's a.
they'd
that's a
be doing it
different thing, too.
themselves, yeah,
Yeah.
I think.
All right, I added it to my list for Lauren. Similarly to the referendum requirement, the recall of elected officials also have the requirement of 20% voter participation within the recall election. Anything else within 3? Section 4? .5, I noted that this is the first one that we've seen that had a smaller than 4/5 vote to remove or suspend or terminate by the Board of Selectmen. They only require the affirmative votes of 3 members out of 5. Anything else in 4?
I just found it notable that was it 4T, they fixed the compensation based on limits established by the appropriations of representative town meeting versus, I think most people kind of do it reverse, right? They fix compensation and then try to seek the money at town meeting, right? Like the contracts are already fixed. Anyway, that's what I'm saying.
I don't know, I thought they had to negotiate the contract within the,
So this one's saying that to negotiate within the limits of town meeting. I don't think we have that kind of structure here. Not that I think that necessarily would be the best mechanism, since we don't ever increase the tax base that much, but I just thought it was notable and interesting, that's all.
okay. Section 5. One thing I did notice, this is the first one that we've read that does not have a calendar year end fiscal year, which I was beginning to think it was a requirement by the state, but apparently not.
Yeah, it also has a 5-year fiscal year for planning under I, right?
Yes.
Which I thought was good.
So that was the reason I had asked the question to Dr. Byeda. I wasn't sure, if we had the ability to change the calendar year end. That provided him any, it sounds like, for any gains,
This one does, or this one doesn't?
it does not,
This one goes from July 1st to June 30th.
June 30th, yeah.
Which is the same as what we do, right? Are you saying it's different?
I thought we had calendar year end. Am I losing my mind?
No, it's the
We do.
same, it's July.
It is.
First.
I'm losing my mind. For some reason, I highlighted it thinking it was different than
Most
ours.
towns follow fiscal years by school years.
Yeah,
So you thought it was January to December?
I did, yeah. At least when I read this, and I wrote it, and I said, the last time we read this, I said, oh, can we change? Because somebody had said, oh, we don't get the numbers from the state until after we've done our budget, and I had asked about the calendar year, but for some reason I was thinking we had a calendar year end. Never mind, disregard me.
Yeah, maybe they don't get the state numbers until June, but we've already had Springtown meeting by that point.
No, and they don't get final numbers until, July, this year it was August.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else in 5? Anything in 6? We're at 7, which,
For 6-8, I did notice that each elected and appointed multiple member body shall report annually to the town. I thought that was interesting. To have the boards all submit a report.
don't we currently? Within the annual town meeting,
The
or the
board.
annual town report, isn't there like a, report from each,
I know, I've never been asked for
no?
the committees I've been on.
I know there's one from FinCom,
Yeah,
I know there's
FinCom has
one,
to do one,
the clerk does one.
right.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how it's determined here, who has to do one or provide one and who doesn't. Anything else in 6?
Oh, sorry, I was the one, but I like the budget message item. They have 5A4, but that was, I should explain that. And you just kind of give more detail to those. How they message the budget out, I guess.
Yeah, that might help, especially with some of the issues that Dr. Byeda had raised tonight. And just even things you see in social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to, like, you can interpret that in so many different ways, and, over time,
Yeah.
anything would fly probably, but, but it does tend to set a tone for how you want your town to operate. Do you want them to be transparent and make it readable and something you can understand, or do you want
Yeah.
something that only
That's
rocket
the
science could figure out, and, 'cause I know I read certain towns, like school department budgets, and you read the cover page, and you're like, geez,
School
I think
department.
I kind of get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other towns, I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about.
And that should be the goal.
Should be the goal,
Right,
right,
'cause
right.
we all can't read a line item.
Right, you may not always achieve it, but it should be a
Right.
goal.
Right,
Yeah.
I think that's probably why it's in there like that.
yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some great examples of how they communicate to the public about budget, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I can really understand just from reading the top 2 pages or so.
Right,
I can understand what they're asking for and why.
yeah, and someone's got to take it seriously and actually do it, of course, and do it,
Yeah.
But I like that kind of thing, so should be something you strive for.
Yeah. Anything else?
I just, in the last, are we on to 7?
Yeah.
In 7.2, I was reading through it, and I kind of got to the end, and I felt like, well, what else? It just felt like an incomplete book to me. I think, I like that they have it in here, but it doesn't say anything in terms of, and now what? And now what are you gonna do with this information? Once you gather it, it doesn't hold any, doesn't talk about taking any of the information to a vote. It just talks about posting the information that these committees will come up with. But nothing that puts in there that has to have any type of binding vote or go to the people. And my thought is, if you're gonna put it in, I feel like it should have something.
I think that might be a requirement for all towns to do that, because you have that too, right?
Correct, but I feel like if we're redoing the charter or making some changes to the charter, unless Massachusetts law says we can't, I feel like it should have, it shouldn't stop here. It should say, okay, these findings should be published, but they should also go to the voters of the people, the voters of the town, or the representative town people. The representative, in this case, should be able to vote on whether or not those changes should be adopted. It just seems like you're making changes, or you're making recommendations for changes, and they're not going anywhere,
Yeah.
right? So what's the point in reviewing it if you can't? Or to make those changes, does all this have to happen every time you make them?
Yeah, I think some of that is set by state law of the process that any charter change has to go through. And I think in representative town meeting, I would imagine is the same as the open town meeting, that you could bring it forward to the town meeting and have them vote on it, whether or not it says it in the charter, because that's the process to get it approved.
I get that. I get what you're saying. I guess I'm just slightly confused on, even in our charter, which ends like this, right? You have these great studies and great ideas and great thoughts, but it doesn't have to go anywhere. And it didn't. So in order to go somewhere and make some actual changes, there had to be this huge process that you guys went through, and gathering those signatures and submitting them and doing that. Is there a way to ensure that the charter can do that every 10 years, and if there are changes that need to be made?
Yeah, I think,
maybe it
but
is
the
a
reason
state.
we went through this is because we wanted to make changes beyond what you could make with a committee. Or I shouldn't say wanted to make changes, because I don't know what changes we're gonna make, but we wanted to look into other, options beyond what you can do with a regular every 10-year committee.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's ever been a time when the committee gets together. I know it happened with the government study committee, but that was because they were they recommended a change in form of government, which that's the state, as they say, that you can't do that any other way besides a charter commission or a special act through legislature. So, but that every 10 years, those committees, if they want to make smaller changes, or any changes besides basically your form of government, they can bring that forward to town meeting. Town meeting has to vote on it, and then it has to go to from there has to go to, election to be voted on.
I guess to Jamie's point, is it not required to do that?
I think the state requires.
That these suggestions go to town meeting?
Well, I mean, the charter committee can bring it forward to the town meeting, right? They can't deny the charter committee bringing it forward to the town meeting.
Requesting an article be put on.
Right.
But, so every article needs to be approved by
Board of
Board of
Selectmen.
Selectmen and FinCom. What if Board of Selectmen?
Well, they don't have to
voted it down?
approve it, they can, you still have a right to put it on.
So what is it?
Like a citizen petition, right? You can put a citizen petition on. If I got, what is it? 100, I think, citizens for the article? You can put that on, 100 signatures, you can put that on the.
And none of the other committees can stop it?
No, they can disagree, they cannot support it, but it still has to go on.
I wonder if
I
it's
just-
just, sorry, go ahead.
I just feel like we haven't seen that in the past, and I know there have been some committees in the past who've come up with some really great stuff, but I don't think it's gone anywhere. It's sat and died on someone's desk.
Right.
I think, isn't the only time that happened, though, it was with the government study committee, which again was limited because you can't bring forward to town meeting a suggestion for changing your form of government. That has to go through a different process.
Yeah, and I suspect that we'll know more when we talk to people who have been on those committees before. Like Phil Gouveia, I'm sure will be a great resource for understanding when those come forward or not. I know at least the one that someone mentioned before that had gone forward and was implemented was like the town clerk going from elected to appointed. Was an example of one, I think, that was successfully implemented from one of those 5-year charter commission groups, or whatever, or 10 years, whatever it is. But I think, like you said, I think I've heard more stories of them dying on the table than anything else.
So any changes other than changing the form of government, so let's say one of these committees decided to organize a subcommittee for the moderator to, have X amount of people appoint FinCom, right? That's a change that can go through this and doesn't have to go through the state?
Right.
Okay.
I think, and it's the state probably.
I think they give an
maybe
opinion on
has
it.
to check.
Yeah, I think
Just
they'll
like
give
they
an
do with
opinion
us,
to make sure
maybe,
it's
that
within.
the- They don't agree or disagree, but they just say, does it comply with,
Yeah.
State law.
does it contradict, or, in any way? Something that's not supposed to
Yeah.
contradict.
I'm wondering if it's left out because it's just assumed that would be the process, like you're required to do this, the board puts a committee, or whoever puts a committee together, and it's assumed that that is the natural process, and that's why it's specifically not addressed.
I think because from there, it has to follow the state timeline, the state
Right.
process. And maybe you don't want to put that in your charter in case the state changes that process.
Maybe.
But I think you should put in what you can do.
Or you could make reference to this.
Yeah, it just, and bring it to town, vote in the,
According to,
yeah.
I read this, I wouldn't think you'd necessarily have to do anything, that doesn't have to go any further than the selectman's office.
Yeah.
That's why I read this. May not be true, but that's how I would read it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the people gotta vote on it.
That doesn't say anything about the vote, people voting on it, though. It talks about a public meeting.
I think every time we've had anything in the charter changed in the town meeting, the selectmen voted on it, and then it went, we had an article for the town meeting, and then the town meeting voted on it, and they changed it. Because some of the things they had one time, they wanted to change something about with chainsaws and noise and dirt bikes, and we actually stood up and shot it down because they don't want it.
Right. No,
I
I
think
think
it
some do
requires
go
it,
forward.
though.
I'm just saying, I don't think they necessarily have to
Require
go
it,
forward.
probably.
Like, if the selectmen don't want to put it forward, I don't think there's anything to force them to make it go forward.
Right.
I would tend to think, yeah. I mean, if you have a committee that you've established that have,
Why waste their time?
yeah, and if they, I would think so, and I would think it should be spelled out what would happen with the committee's findings.
Yeah, I agree.
But I get the limit, I get what you're saying in terms of the limitations in the state, and what's allowed and what's not there.
Right.
I think this would be a question, I think, for Lauren to see, does it need to be spelled out? Is it taken care of by state law? Or in the charter?
Even if it was taken care of by state law, you'd think that they would say, implemented according to state laws.
Right.
I would think.
Right.
Okay. Anything else on Dedham? All right. Our next charter is Stoughton. Sandy handed those out. I have Denise out for the next
Yep.
meeting, okay. And I'll make sure you get a copy of whatever the next charter is. Anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss?
Have we done number 4 under interviews?
Yes, I went back
We
to
did do
it.
that?
Yeah, that was the August 26th was canceled,
Oh,
and we
sorry.
replaced October 21st with the 22nd.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, so I was actually, if I could, I was just going to throw something out there.
Yeah, good.
I sort of, and I'm just throwing this out there, but as we interview, you know, the various department heads, I sometimes, and it naturally seems to go this way, but they want to talk about their budget. And we end up getting really into the budget, and the details behind the budget, and their struggles with it, which are all real, and I'm not minimizing any of that. But you know, and I think tonight, like a lot of Dr. Mayetta clearly knows everything that's going on in that school system, like, as I would expect he would. But I'm not sure some of it's applicable to what we're trying to accomplish. And so I listen to it, and it's interesting, but I'm not sure how it ties back to the charter sometimes.
Yeah.
I would agree that and the space, right? The building.
Yeah.
That's not-
Yeah, the building's a great
that's not-
example, like, what did that have to do with the?
That's not our purview, right?
Yeah.
Right, right.
No,
Maybe
a lot of
someday,
the things
you know,
are.
changing the charter may generate other things in town that maybe will somehow impact that building, maybe not, who knows? But,
Yeah, we've
But
tried,
it doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel, I don't see any connection whatsoever to that discussion to the charter.
Yeah.
at times. And it's hard to keep them on track, because they want to talk about, you know,
Yeah.
their departments, and they want to talk about what they do, and I totally get it.
yeah. Yeah,
But it's important to listen to him too, I think. I mean, as residents, it's embarrassing that she has to give shots and then go downstairs and wash her hands. Like, that's shameful.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I mean, and I think some of it's good to hear, and I think it's, you know, I just, sometimes I feel like maybe we're going a little too far down that rabbit hole, I guess. And
Yeah.
that's kinda like-
We're not doing the charter.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
understand.
yeah.
we did recognize that initially, so what we've done is before they come to our meeting, we give them a brief introduction of what the charter, so we use the,
Summary.
the summary that Carrie had put together for the public hearing, and we give them a copy of that. We tell them specifically, you know, what we have the ability to affect. We make reference lightly to the fact that, you know, keeping in mind budget constraints are outside of, you know, the purview of the Charter Commission. But I have to agree with Janie that, you know, if we're bringing them in here, we want to get their opinions and their feedback, you know, we may have to listen to a little bit. And I don't necessarily think it's not useful. It may trigger, you know, some idea, something that we can do to be creative. You know, certainly we could put within the charter, you know, the town must have an IT director. That doesn't mean there's an appropriation of money for that within the budget. So, you know, we have tried to guide them specifically, you know, to staying outside of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know personally, myself, like tonight, I kind of felt like we were sort of so far down the hole that I had a hard time sort of figuring
Yeah.
out how to get back to talk about that charter.
he
And
was,
some of my questions, for example, I tried to gear them in terms of, preface them in terms of what I wanted to talk about. I think I want to talk about leadership or something, but
Yeah, just kind of throwing it out there, I was just.
yeah, some people are harder to
Oh, absolutely.
to wrangle than others.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You know, and some people are just gonna have to, you know, yank answers out of them. You know, I'll see if there's a way we can fine tune the introductory.
Yeah, I think they naturally come in and want to talk about their budget and their
Yeah.
department, you know, specifically, and they probably have a hard time.
Yeah, I
coming up
think
with
when
the
we ask
town
them,
que- You know, if they
you know-
don't live in town, for example, it's pretty hard to, what do you like about the town government? Well, I
Yeah,
don't know, I read the Sun Chronicle, that's about all I know about it, you know. and
Yeah.
That's a fair answer.
yeah,
But the town government structure does impact the ability to do the job, right?
It does, some of them
There
does,
could
you
be
know,
Yeah.
absolutely.
roadblocks that are being
Yeah,
created
Yeah.
because of the structure.
right. Like, for example, Dr. Bayetta was, gives all kind of information tonight, but I wasn't really sure. I personally didn't necessarily know if at the end, if I understood, like, how did he feel the government the structure was working for him?
Yeah.
And that's,
Well, and he's a
That's-
special case because so much of what he does is dictated by the state. not
oh,
having-
absolutely. No, yeah, and maybe the answer was
town,
nothing. I
so,
just wasn't quite sure
yeah.
when he asked the question, that's all. I
Yeah.
personally wasn't sure.
And his role is really outside of, in a lot of ways, outside of the charter.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was
Yeah, yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
where I was headed by the
Yeah.
end of
Yeah.
of his
Yeah.
talk, so.
Yeah.
No.
action items?
So I have Kevin's going to drop off surveys at Town Hall and Senior Center. Is he gonna copy them too? Or you-
No, I told him I would do it.
Okay. Denise is gonna reach out to Kevin and coordinate a time to visit the senior center to talk to them.
Well, I'll either coordinate time with him or just, I'll let Beth know that one of us will reach out to her to coordinate a
Okay.
time. If he wants to just do that directly, it's fine too.
Okay. And then,
If he shows up in uniform, the folks there are just gonna love him.
I went on a Friday and it was packed.
Really? How many people?
I didn't count, but.
Yeah.
There was a woman singing, and so there was a pretty big audience kind of listening to her.
Oh, okay.
Singing
oh,
the
that's right,
oldies
I saw
tunes.
the- on their Facebook page, yeah. Yeah, and then I have that, Laura, you're gonna coordinate with Lucia to get
It must
information on the
have been officially
website.
off
Yep.
at
Send out the
9 or
Norton alert,
something.
post on the Norton Alerts Facebook page, which Janie's gonna share on the Norton groups. And then you'll, try to reserve the room for the
Thank you. I didn't write that down.
22nd.
Good reminder, thank you. Actually, the calendar's right there, but I can't get at it. Oh, is that door open? It might be. I'm not sure if it's through next October yet, though. Yeah, it should be. The last I checked, the calendar ended in August. Okay. Anything else? Take a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion of it.
Seconded? No other discussion?
That was a race.
We are adjourned.